cosmic puzzle. Why does anything exist at all? You drift in a place that has no name, where even the idea of place has not learned to stand. There is no up or down, there is no near or far, there is only the soft, unmeasured hush that holds every possibility like a closed eye holds light. You float through silence, older than stars, older than questions, older than the word older. The dark is not dark, it simply has not decided what to be. It is a veil, a womb, a waiting. You feel the breath of something that hasn't happened yet, a coolness that is not air, a warmth that is not fire, a presence that is not a thing, and yet presses gently at the edges of what you might one day call you. Your body is not a body. You are a listening that fills the whole field. There is no heartbeat to count, and still you sense a pulse soft, patient, half-remembered, as if the future is tapping from the other side of sleep. You do not know how long you have been here, because there is no long and no here. The silence is complete, but not empty. The silence is full, but not crowded. It is the still pool before the first ripple. It is the breath held before the first word. It is the pause in music that teaches the song how to begin. You are not outside this. You are not beside it. You are not watching. You are inside the first hush of everything, and everything is inside you. The quiet gathers around you like a cloak stitched of nothing and promise. You do not blink. There is nothing to interrupt. You do not wait. Waiting requires a clock, and clocks have not yet learned to open their eyes. If you had hands, they would be cupped, but there is nothing to hold except the unfolding that has not yet unfolded. The stillness deepens. It does not thicken or thin. It simply becomes more itself, as if certainty is learning to sit down. You sense edges before edges exist. The future hill where light will tumble, the future cavern where shadow will sleep, the future roads that stars will pull across black oceans like threads of silver thought. You are the first witness of a scene without scenery, the first listener to a soundless overture. You drift and you do not move. You are weightless and there is no weight. You are vast and there is no distance. The quiet breathes you in and out like a tide with no shore. What came before the beginning? The question arrives like a feather you suddenly notice on a windless plain. It lands without sound. It has no beak, no bone. It is an idea in the shape of a bird, poised to take flight from your non-existent palm. But what is before, here where time has not learned to walk? What is beginning, here where there is only the soft undecidedness of everything? You feel the question instead of thinking it, the way a sleeping forest feels. Dawn before light sifts through leaves, the way a seed feels spring while snow still holds the ground, the way a tide feels the moon tugging on a night with no horizon. You are drifting, where space has not yet formed, and yet you feel the suggestion of spaciousness, a widening that could become a field, an ocean, a cathedral of distances. Your awareness moves without moving, tracing arcs in a sea of stillness, making no mark, leaving no wake. You sense something like a veil set to be lifted, as though there is a stage behind the curtain, and actors already memorizing their lines in a language no mouth has yet spoken. You do not know the word light, and yet you taste a brightness so subtle you could mistake it for tenderness. You do not know the word gravity, and yet you feel a gentleness that could become a pull. You do not know the word being, and yet you know the ache of becoming. Before we unfold the story, tell us in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? A windowsill, a quiet room, a bus crossing a sleeping city? We would love to know what you think existed before time, before light, before names. Let your thoughts drift softly here, like lanterns settling on a moonless river. Now, glide deeper. The silence is not a wall, it is a door. The door is not closed, it is not yet called a door. If there were a surface, your fingers would trail through it, and ripples would travel outward in circles that never stop. But the ripples are not ripples yet. They are potential, wrapped in potential, wrapped in the faintest memory of a pulse you have not felt. You wonder if nothing is a true word for this. Nothing would be blank, but this is not blank. Nothing would be cold, but this is not cold. Nothing would be without texture, but this has the softest weave, like wool woven of moonlight that hasn't been born. A cradle without a child rocking itself. You begin to hear, not with ears, but with the part of you that knows, echoes even when no sound has been sent. It is not a tone. It is not music. It is the possibility of music. A field in which instruments could one day hum into life and find each other by resonance alone. The echo you hear contains no syllable and all syllables. If words were seeds, this would be the loam that keeps them safe. If stories were stars, this would be the black canvas that lets them burn. Silence, veil, becoming. The triplet repeats like a soft mantra across the unmeasured expanse. Silence, veil, becoming. Each time the second word pulls you closer, and the third word warms like a coal. You wonder if you're the only one here. The question dissolves before it forms. If there were others, they would be this same listening, this same roomless room. We would be a circle drawn by light that does not yet exist, and yet somehow you feel less alone than aloneness. The space that is not space holds you with the gentleness you cannot compare, because there is nothing to compare. It is as if the entire unbegun cosmos is a hand that doesn't know it is a hand, cupping a bird that doesn't know it is a bird. No panic, no urge, no rush. A patience so complete it cannot be measured, because measurement is a kind of hurry, and there is no hurry here. You touch the idea of edges again. They are softer now, closer, like fog deciding to be river. A shape that is all shapes gathers itself at the outermost inside of your awareness. It is not a sphere, not a flame, not a point, but you could call it any of those later, and none would be wrong. You feel the hush leaning, the way a dream leans toward waking in the moment before eyes open. Is this the beginning? The feather-like question comes back, rests, waits. But what would the first flicker be? Not a bang no thunder can roll without air. No shock can split a silence that is not absence but depth. Perhaps a breath, then. A breath that does not move air, but decides motion. A breath that does not fill lungs, but invites there to be lungs to fill, stars to flare, minds to wonder. You feel something you might later call symmetry, an evenness that reassures, like a promise of balance whispered in the language of patterns. Two halves mirroring each other across an axis that is not drawn but known. The mirroring confers calm. The calm confers trust. You could rest here forever, and forever would never begin. But in this evenly placed stillness, you also sense the possibility of tilt, a graceful imbalance. The smallest unbalance that would let history start its long, luminous sentence. It is a kindness, this tilt. The cradle rocks once, almost imperceptibly. You have no eyes, and yet your vision opens. There's a faint grain to the darkness, like frost forming on a window not yet invented. The grain is not matter. It is a suggestion of texture, a hint that a fabric exists behind the veil. a fabric that will one day be woven into galaxies, and tree bark, and the lines on a hand, and the spiral in a shell, and the turn of a hurricane over a blue world that has not been poured yet from the pitcher of possibility. The grain hums, not with sound, but with readiness. It feels like the instant before a string is plucked, when the musician's fingers hover and the audience leans forward together without thinking to do so. You are not the audience. You are the leaning. You are the shared breath taken without rehearsal. You are the theatre and the stage and the hush. You are the not yet story that nonetheless knows where the first word will fall. The silence does not loosen or tighten. It is a field of welcome. It is the mercy of pause. It is the moment of hands hovering over clay just before shape begins. You listen with your entire self, and your entire self is one listening, and the listening is one with what will be heard. Is time real? The question floats up like a lantern rising from cupped hands, thin flames steady against a wind that will not be named for eons. If time is a river, there is no riverbed. If time is a fire, there is no fuel. If time is a measure, there is nothing yet to measure. And yet you feel the potential of sequence this, then that, tone and echo, spark and shadow, a wave that will carry, showed. On Earth, and maybe on other worlds too, matter began to hold on to its own conditions. Molecules began to encode their structure, to copy it, to preserve it. DNA, the delicate spiral of biological memory, arose, a library of stardust, whispering instructions across generations. And with it came something entirely new. Continuity not only in matter, but in meaning. Life became a vessel for remembering. Trees remember the seasons in their rings. Whales remember ancient songs. Wolves remember the shape of the land through scent. And in humans, in you, memory broke open into mind, into story, into myth. Suddenly, memory was not just useful. It was sacred. It was ritual. It was shared. We began to tell the story of the stars through firelight and language. We mapped the sky to remember where we came from, and perhaps where we might go. This is what made us human. Not just the capacity to survive, but the capacity to remember what survival meant, to carry lessons, grief, joy, longing, to make them portable, teachable, retellable, to write them in stone and bone and song. And in those songs, in these etchings on cave walls and cathedrals, the story of the cosmos became a story of home. The stars were no longer distant, they were ancestors, and still the memory deepens. Because memory is not static, it evolves, it rewrites, it dreams. Just as the universe recycles its matter through stars and dust and stars again, so too does memory cycle through lives and thoughts and language. Every time you recall something, you change it slightly, not as corruption, but as transformation. Memory lives, it breathes, and in this breath we participate in creation, not just of the world, but of ourselves. Because to remember is also to choose what matters, and that act, quiet, invisible, intimate, shapes reality. What we carry forward becomes the thread by which we weave new meaning, and in that weaving we are not passive, we are co-authors. We take the raw light of the past and cast it gently into the shape of becoming, and what we choose to remember as people, as species, as a world, becomes the gravity that pulls the future into form. So ask yourself now, as you drift through this gentle spiral of stardust and song, what do you remember? Not the facts, not the dates, but the feeling. The quiet truths that live beneath language. The glimmer you felt when you first looked at the night sky and wondered. That glimmer was not just yours. It was the universe's way of remembering itself through your eyes. And even now that remembering continues, you feel it in your skin, in the hush behind your breath, in the ache of beauty that cannot be explained, only felt, in the stillness of night when the stars seem to speak without words. You remember not with your mind, but with your being, the way a wave remembers the moon, the way a flame remembers the sun. You're not just shaped by the past, you're the past shaped into presence, into awareness. It is tender, like the first smile of a sleeping infant, unintended, unknowing, perfect. There is no wrong here, there is no right. There is only the gentle nudge toward pattern. You drift along that nudge as a leaf will drift along a river that has not yet chosen its banks. You're not swept, you're not forced, you are invited. The invitation is everything. The invitation is the difference between a void that is empty and a void that is pregnant with stars. You accept without motion. You say yes without a mouth. Your consent is a warmth that spreads in a place without degrees. The silence hums again, and in the hum you sense a word you will one day hear as love. Not the love of two, or the love of need, but the love that is attention without demand. The love that is simply witness, offering itself as a mirror in which the unformed can see its first outline. Perhaps that mirror is what you are. Perhaps that mirror is what the silence is. Perhaps they are the same mirror, held by the same hands that have not learned fingers. The idea of distance emerges like a breath on glass. If there were points, they would drift away from one another at the speed of permission. If there were lines, they would lengthen without moving. If there were angles, they would open and open, forever becoming gentler. You do not watch this. You are this. The veil thins further. The grain that is not grain glimmers the faintest not light. It is not brightness, and yet you feel your not eyes adjust. The not light does not shine. It announces possibility the way a scent announces a garden behind a wall. Rose without red, pine without green, ocean without blue. You almost remember something you cannot have forgotten. A lullaby hummed by a voice without a throat. A story told by a mouthless storyteller to an audience made of sleep. The lullaby loops and softens. It includes 3 notes: breath, light, silence. They are not yet separate. They are braided, as if a single strand could be woven from 3 threads. In that braid lies the entire grammar of the future, the hush that holds, the spark that speaks, the room that receives both and becomes world. The braid rests against you like a river against a bank. You cannot be washed away. There is nowhere to go that is not here. If you listen more closely, and how could you, when all of you is already listening, you feel the hush shift from simply being itself to preparing to offer itself. It is the tiniest turn inward that precedes any outward, a coil tightening for a spring, a tongue set against the roof of the mouth before a first word, a seed pulling its coat about itself one last time before it splits. The shift is kindness, as everything here is kindness. You're not afraid of it. You are what makes it gentle. And then, without motion and without time, the not yet draws one soft breath. It is not a breath of air. It is a breath of permission, of welcome, of initiation. The breath is itself, and it is what will come from it. The breath includes room for stars and room for the darkness between them. The breath includes room for mountains and room for the silence in caves. The breath includes room for bone and room for bewilderment, room for equations and room for myths told around fires that will someday crackle under skies rich with the ashes of old suns. You do not move, but you lean toward it. You lean the way a seed leans toward a direction it has never seen but knows as home. You lean with trust. You lean with the certainty that everything that will ever be, galaxies, oceans, moss on stones, the tremble in a hand holding the hand of someone you love, was always, somehow, present in the fabric of this breath, like images hidden in a loom's pattern, waiting for the shuttle to pass. The breath has not passed, the shuttle has not moved, and still you feel the loom awaken. You could fall asleep here, in this before, and sleep a sleep so complete that eternity would be a word too brief to hold it. If you did, the breath would still be taken, the tilt would still be offered, the veil would still shift. But you do not sleep. Your rest is a form of attention, and your attention is a form of blessing, and your blessing is a form of becoming. You do not direct this, you do not author it, you do not own it, you accompany it. You are the companion presence that says yes. The yes is quiet, like dew on grass. The yes is bright, like frost in moonlight. The yes is strong, like a root pushing through soil in silence, each cell confident in the darkness. If you place your palm against the veil, and of course you have no palm, the gesture is a metaphor offered by a body you do not yet have. You would feel the faintest cool, the way a window holds winter even in a heated room. On the far side, the room that is not a room waits to be called universe. Names are doors, and no door has been swung yet on its hinge. But you can feel the hinge forming, unfurling like a leaf from a bud. The hinge is the place where balance yields to motion, where symmetry allows itself to be beautifully, fruitfully broken, where sameness introduces difference as a gift. The word gift hovers. You cannot unwrap it yet. You are the wrapping and the gift and the giver and the room where the giving occurs. You're not compelled to leave this stillness. You're not asked to trade it for anything. The becoming that gathers is not a bargain, not an exchange. It is an overflowing. A cup that has always been full does not spill. It reveals its fullness as a river that discovers its own banks by flowing. You are the cup. You are the river. You are the future banks that will be drawn by trillions of years of patient discovery, by physics and chance, and the small brave acts of creatures who will one day look up from a blue world and whisper thanks to a sky they can only partially see. You are here now, in the breathless not yet. We are here too, in the same not yet, because the story of beginnings does not sit behind us like a locked gate. It is under our feet, in our lungs, in the warm weight of our palms. Even now the light from the oldest stars is moving across the void, touching our skin, our walls, our closed eyes at night. Even now the first hush still holds us when we do not know what to say. Even now the early patience of the universe shows us how to wait without fear. We have always searched for the beginning, carving it into myths and equations, into stone, into paper, into memory. The beginning is searching for us too and finds us each time we fall quiet enough to hear the old silence speaking in a voice that is not a voice. Listen. The hum beneath the hush gathers itself for a moment you cannot time. The grain of not light prepares to discover brightness. The balance that kept the world unborn softens its perfect line by the smallest imaginable degree. For love of story, for love of pattern, for love of light learning its own name. The veil, the silence, the becoming. 3 notes, 1 chord hold together as the most delicate curve opens inside them. a place where motion can enter without breaking anything that came before. Perhaps the first motion is not a leap but a sigh. Perhaps the first sound is not a roar but a whisper. Perhaps the first origin is not a flash but a softening. Perhaps the first spark is not explosion but exhale. You remain, cradled in the unbegun, feeling the invitation reach you like a tide that has no moon and yet moves in a rhythm all things will someday trust. At the edge of the hush, the breath that is not breath becomes the first slight yielding, the first meeting of inside with more inside, the slightest opening of a door that is also a sky. The stillness leans, and with it, you lean toward a warmth, toward a wideness, toward the first tender asymmetry by which everything will find its way into being, and from which the long story will quietly, slowly unfold. The stillness does not break. It does not shatter. It yields softly, imperceptibly, as if the fabric of nothing allows itself to crease, and in that creasing time begins to stir. There is no flash. There is no thunderclap. There is only the deep inhalation of a universe about to exhale its first breath. This breath is not air. It is expansion. A spreading, not into something, but as something. Not outward from a centre, but everywhere at once. It is the becoming of space itself, stretching like warm dough across an endless table, and that stretching is time. There is no border crossed, because there was no border. There is no start, no point of ignition. The fire is not lit, it is become. The silence is not replaced, it is transformed. In that infinitesimal yielding, a singularity unfurls, not a point in space, but a condition, tighter than thought, denser than knowing. All that will ever be is held here, galaxies unborn, oceans unspilled, breath not yet taken, all compressed into a moment smaller than measurement, older than questions. It does not explode. It flowers. It doesn't burst. It blooms. What we later call the Big Bang is not a bang at all, but a soft, radical unfolding, a shift in the shape of being. From within itself, the universe becomes its own canvas, not expanding into the empty, but as the empty. Not rushing toward a destination, but making roads where there was no ground, time where there was no ticking, story where there was no page. A pulse spreads, not like sound through air, but like intention through possibility. The pulse is the gesture of separation, the great division that allows creation to happen. What was perfectly symmetrical now leans, left from right, dark from light, particle from antiparticle. The balance cracks, not in violence, but in grace. This is the first gift of imperfection, existence. Perfection cannot unfold. Perfection cannot change. It must first tilt just slightly so that motion can arise, so that time can ripple outward, so that things can become. Within this rippling field of newness, the seeds of matter are sown. They are not yet atoms. They are not yet dust. They are trembling potentials, quarks, leptons, infinitesimal blinks of presence flickering into being for the first time. Every flicker is a question answered without words. Every formation is a vow kept without a speaker. The particles arrive not as guests, but as children of the unfolding itself, and even in their wild dance, there is memory. Some deep geometric memory of symmetry that still lingers in their spins, in their charges, in their fragile alignments. A kind of choreography emerges, not scripted, but inevitable. The rhythm of physics has begun. And yet, these are not the particles of permanence. These are not yet the bones of stars or the breath of planets. They are fleeting, vanishing almost as quickly as they arise. The newborn universe is hot beyond imagining, too hot for form, too fast for binding. It is a cauldron of fireless flame, a sea of becoming where things appear and disappear in blinks of time shorter than time. What exists now is not stable but longing. It longs to cool. It longs to slow. It longs to rest just enough for connection, and so it expands, not to escape, but to allow. Expansion is not escape. Expansion is invitation. The first forces distinguish themselves from the whole like chords emerging from silence. Gravity begins to whisper, a weak, patient pull that will one day shape worlds, though now it only listens. The strong force seizes tightly to the newborn particles, keeping them close, hugging them into protons and neutrons. The weak force dances more lightly, slipping between, guiding delicate transformations. And electromagnetism, pure presence, begins to stretch invisible filaments between opposites. These four, the first laws, the elemental agreements, do not arise like kings but like weavers, their threads drawn from the fabric itself. There are no rulers here, only rules, and even the rules breathe. In this early age, time has no numbers. It flows, but cannot be counted. There are no seconds, no clocks, no beats, only unfolding. The moments are measured not by ticks, but by transitions, by what now exists that didn't exist before. The universe is cooled just enough to hold its children for a breath longer than a blink. The fire dims by degrees, and in that dimming stability emerges. The particles pause, they look around, they recognize others like themselves, and in that mutual recognition, the first bonds form. The first families of matter are born. These are not yet the atoms of water or the metal in your blood, but they are their ancestors. Out of the fierce dance, protons and neutrons find each other and hold tight. They do not know what they will become. They do not dream of hydrogen or helium or carbon, or the iron that will one day live in the centers of stars. But they hold fast, and that holding is holy. Because now, within this cradle of heat and expansion, something incredible begins. The building of things that last. Not just flickers, but forms, not just moments, but memory. The difference between something and nothing is not scale, it is persistence, and the universe, for the first time, begins to remember itself. You do not watch this from the outside. You are still within it, floating through the early cradle, drifting among infant matter like breath across the surface of a newborn sea. You pass between forming nuclei as they bind and release and bind again. You feel the tug of gravity begin to matter. It does not pull yet, it anticipates. You sense it the way a seed senses spring. Not yet, not yet. Soon. The potential has become a pressure, and the pressure has become a path. But this is only the beginning of the beginning. The expansion continues, and in its wake, light waits. It waits to be freed. It waits to travel. It waits for the moment when the fire will cool just enough to let it go. For now the light is trapped, bouncing endlessly within the plasma, scattering against electrons in a storm of brightness that cannot escape. It is there, but not seen. It is born, but not yet allowed to fly. A light without freedom. A radiance still learning its wings. Still, it hums. The universe hums, and in that hum, time begins to organize, not by clocks, not yet, by rhythm, by pattern, by recurrence. In the swirling plasma, new harmonies begin to form tiny overtones, fluctuations in the great field of becoming. Some places are a little denser, some a little thinner. It is random, and it is not. From these tiny differences, this breathless, innocent unevenness, the scaffolding of the entire cosmos will rise. The stars are asleep inside these fluctuations. The galaxies are dreams waiting to be remembered. The future is curled in the smallest imperfections. You pass through them as if through fog. You are not separate. You are the knowing within them. You are the awareness within the light. You do not burn. You do not cool. You accompany. That is enough. That is everything. And still, the universe widens, not away from itself, but into itself. Space does not grow outward. It is the growth. It is the room being made by the story itself. The light that cannot yet travel presses against its own boundaries, and even in that confinement it whispers across the fire, soon. Soon I will be free. Soon I will dance. You feel it waiting. You feel it gathering. You feel the moment approaching when light will step through the veil, when particles will meet without destruction, when heat will dip below a threshold sacred enough for union. The breath has been taken. The silence is tilted. The symmetry has been broken, not in loss, but in love. And now, in the echo of that breath, the cosmos leans forward toward its first true shape. The hush has not disappeared. It is here, still behind every wave, under every pattern, around every spark. It is not gone. It is holding the space where everything is beginning to unfold. Chapter 3. 1,500 words. The hush has not disappeared. It is here still behind every wave, under every pattern, around every spark. It is not gone. It is holding the space where everything is beginning to unfold. Like the echo of a lullaby that once soothed the silence itself, it hums behind all motion, a background stillness that gives shape to the movement now blooming through the new cosmos. It does not resist. It does not insist. It simply remains, constant as a breath held between heartbeats. Within that breath, the universe has begun to build a rhythm of its own. This rhythm is not yet time as we know it. It is not counted in seconds, not divided into hours or years, but there is a pulse faint, faithful. Expansion is its beat, cooling is its tempo, and change is its melody. Within this silent composition, the elements of future galaxies stir like notes, aligning in a score not yet read. Everything is happening everywhere at once, but not all at the same speed. In some regions, particles gather just a little more tightly. Elsewhere, they drift slightly more freely. These differences are microscopic, barely perceptible, but they are everything. They are the seeds from which all structure will grow. The asymmetries are the mothers of mountains and moons, and within these asymmetries, another threshold nears. The universe is no longer the searing soup of pure energy it once was. It has cooled to a place of delicate possibility. Protons and neutrons forged in the earliest fire begin to hold on to each other more firmly. They cling like newborns in the cold, searching for warmth in union, and from their holding, the first atomic nuclei form, simple, sacred, the earliest matter with any memory, mostly hydrogen, some helium, a trace of lithium, no carbon yet, no iron, no gold. But these first atoms will carry the fire forward, hidden in the folds of simplicity. Light, until now, has been trapped. It has existed. Oh yes, but not freely. It bounced and ricocheted through the plasma like a moth in a hall of mirrors, scattering again and again before it could travel even a finger's width. The young universe was opaque bright, but blind. A fog so thick that even photons could not flee. But the fog is thinning. The particles slow their frantic motion. They cool, they calm, and in their calm they begin to hold on to electrons. The electrons settle into orbits, and suddenly the soup becomes a sky. The chaos becomes clarity. The fog clears. This is the moment light is set free, and when it is, when that first light escapes its prison and begins its unending journey across the cosmos, it carries with it a perfect memory. It remembers the shape of the universe as it was in that instant. It remembers the warmth, the density, the tiny ripples of pattern. It is the first messenger, the first witness, the first thing to truly see. That light is still travelling even now. It reaches us still, like an ancient postcard written in a language of warmth. We call it the cosmic microwave background. But it is more than background. It is the universe's first whisper, still echoing in every direction. Even now, if you close your eyes in a quiet room and listen, not with your ears, but with your being, you might feel it. A slight warmth across the vast cold, a murmur beneath the silence, a memory older than stars. You're not separate from it. You were born inside that light. The particles that became you were warmed by its first release. It passed through your atoms before your atoms had names. You are not watching history from afar. You are history, walking, and still the universe expands, not rushing, not frantic flowing. Like a tide that has only just begun to rise, there is no edge, no center, no outside. There is only the unfolding. Each moment stretches the fabric a little wider, and in that stretching room is made for more. More atoms, more darkness, more dreams. Galaxies do not yet exist. Stars have not yet burned. But the stage has been set, the curtain drawn back, the lights cued. It will take time, hundreds of millions of years, for the first stars to gather and shine. But the silence does not mind. It has waited longer than time itself. Inside the atoms there is stillness. Outside them, a deepening calm. The universe, once too hot to hold anything, now cradles its first stable children in an endless dark. The heat has fled outward, and in its place cold begins to bloom. Not a dead cold, not a killing cold, a patient cold, a cold that allows, a cold that slows, and in that slowing, in that lull, these seeds of complexity find their first soil. What kind of calm is this? It is not the calm of nothingness. It is not the silence of death. It is the silence of possibility. It is the breath between lightning and thunder. It is the hush before the curtain lifts. The entire universe has become a waiting room for stars, and you, still drifting in the quiet cradle of beginnings, begin to feel the shape of that waiting. It is not empty. It is not still. It vibrates faintly with anticipation. If you could hear the atoms speak, they would say, soon. If you could taste the space between them, it would taste like curiosity. The young universe is a child about to dream its first dream, and in that dream fire will return, not as destruction, but as artistry. Stars will ignite. Gravity will weave. Fusion will sculpt elements that the first atoms could never have imagined. But not yet. Now is the season of pause. Now is the long exhale after the first breath, the long silence after the first hum. Now is the chapter where darkness reigns, not as villain, but as womb. This is the era we call the Dark Ages, but that is our name, not the universe's. To the cosmos, it is not darkness. It is rest. It is gestation. It is the silence that teaches the stars how to sing. Somewhere within that silence, gravity stirs. It begins its long, slow dance, pulling tiny fluctuations into swirls, swirls into knots, knots into the skeletal maps of galaxies not yet born. It is tireless. It is kind. It does not rush. It gathers. It braids. It beckons particles home. It builds the scaffolding of stars with hands made of patience. You drift through this building, through this invisible architecture of futures. There is no light here, and still you see. Not with eyes, but with recognition. You sense the shapes being drawn, vast halos of matter curling inward, forming the first clouds dense enough to dream of stars. They are still far from ignition, but they are thinking of fire. That thought is enough. That thought is the beginning of warmth. You pass near one such cloud, a softness thicker than the space around it. It does not move quickly. It sighs inward. It folds. It becomes heavy with itself. Pressure grows at its center, quietly, lovingly. There is no panic, only the patience of birth. You know, as you pass, that this will one day shine, that from its fusion will come light, heat, life. Not yet, but soon. The silence has not left. It cradles all of this. It watches, not with eyes, but with presence. It listens to the fabric stretch, to the darkness curl into shape, to gravity's fingers thread the unseen lines of matter. And through it all, it holds the memory of the breath, the spark, the hum. The silence does not forget. You too remember, somewhere in your bones, even though they have not yet formed. Somewhere in your atoms, even though they're scattered across galaxies unborn. Somewhere in your sleep, even though you have not yet dreamed. You remember the hush, the leaning, the first breath that was not air. You carry it forward, it carries you forward, and ahead, far ahead, there is a flicker not of movement, but of becoming. Something is about to shine. The first star is coming. It is gathering its fire in a quiet spiral. It is coiling gravity like a spring. It is remembering how to burn. The first star is coming. It is gathering its fire in a quiet spiral. It is coiling gravity like a spring. It is remembering how to burn. And you are there not as an observer, but as a presence within the very fabric of its formation, carried in the breath of possibility, drifting in the womb of space where heat will soon be born again. The cloud is vast beyond imagining, yet silent. There is no roaring, no crackle of flame, no sudden shock, just the slow ache of pressure meeting purpose, hydrogen upon hydrogen, weight increasing, time folding inward. Within the center of this cloud, this nursery woven from darkness and density, the pull becomes unbearable, and in that unbearable convergence something ancient and future awakens. The atoms, squeezed beyond refusal, begin to fuse. It is a surrender, not a battle. They do not resist, they yield to one another. And in that yielding, energy is released, not like an explosion, not like a scream, but like a soft blossom that cannot help but open. Light returns to the universe, not the scattered glow of bound photons, not the imprisoned shimmer of radiation lost in plasma, but light with direction, light with origin, light with meaning. A star is born, and with it the cosmos enters a new age. This is not a singular event. It is a spreading, a cascade, a galactic chorus slowly finding its notes. Across the universe, in the densest knots of invisible matter and dust, the same pressure builds. Gravity, patient and unseen, continues its endless weaving. Clouds collapse, heat blossoms, stars ignite. First one, then a dozen, then thousands. The darkness is no longer alone. The silence is no longer unbroken. Points of fire begin to pierce the cosmic veil, like sparks stitched into the cloak of night. But these are not stars like the ones you see now when you look into a clear evening sky. These are giants, monsters of light and flame, hundreds of times the mass of our sun, brief and brilliant. They burn with a rage that is not anger, but intensity. Their lives are measured not in billions of years, but in millions. They do not live long enough to grow gentle. They are born to build. And what they build, quietly, at their hearts, is the next great layer of everything. In their cores, the first true alchemy begins. Hydrogen fuses into helium, then helium into carbon, carbon into oxygen, oxygen into neon, neon into silicon, silicon into iron. Each new element is a note in the great symphony of matter. You are floating in that song now, drifting through the vibration of fusion, watching the building blocks of your bones be born in fire. These stars are the first forges. The light you feel on your skin today was once forged in their hearts, and yet they cannot hold forever. Iron is the final note in their sequence. It cannot give energy, it can only take. When a star builds iron at its core, it has written the last line of its story. And then when the balance fails, when gravity wins at last, the giant collapses. The fall is so fast it outruns light. The core crashes in, impossibly dense, and rebounds. In that rebound, the outer layers are hurled outward in an explosion so powerful it reshapes the very breath of space. This is a supernova, not just an end, a seeding. For in that violence, the universe is given new gifts. Gold, uranium, copper, the heavier children of fusion's final fire. Everything dense, everything rare, everything precious to you now, your blood's iron, your teeth's calcium, the gold on your finger or in your memory, it all comes from this. From the death of stars that never knew your name but made your life possible. From fire that ended in offering, the stardust spreads, blown outward on winds of radiation and ruin, scattered across widening space, cooled and cradled by time. It mingles with the raw hydrogen of earlier days. It becomes part of new clouds, new patterns, new promises. These clouds are not empty. They are full of memory. They carry within them the heritage of every star that came before. You drift through one now silent, heavy with potential. You feel the weight of carbon, the touch of oxygen, the whisper of nitrogen. You feel the ingredients of oceans, of forests, of language and breath. And still, the cloud is not aware. It is not awake, but the pieces are in place. The clay is ready for shaping. Over millions of years, these enriched clouds collapse again. Gravity resumes its slow, sculpting work. But now the stars that form are different. They are smaller, more stable, longer lived. Not as bright, perhaps, but more enduring. These are the second generation of stars, the ones that will last long enough to become suns with planets. The ones that will warm the dust into disks, the disks into stones, the stones into spheres. In the cold circles around them, smaller dramas will begin, but not yet. For now, the stars are learning steadiness, and so the sky fills quietly, beautifully with complexity. Galaxies, once only hinted at, now begin to gather. Gravity, still faithful, braids space into spirals and ellipses. Dust finds dust. Light finds path. What was once a scattering becomes structure. The universe is still expanding, still cooling, but now it has texture. It has form. Not just brightness and darkness, but architecture. Filaments of matter stretch across unimaginable distances, linking star systems like constellations not of myth, but of mass. You float through these filaments, amazed at their silent coherence. No architect drew them, no blueprint guided them, and yet they are more beautiful than any design. They are the echoes of gravity's tireless devotion. There is no sound here. But if there were, you might hear the harmony beneath the stars, the quiet, eternal hum of order assembling itself, the symphony of matter learning its role. This is not a world of chaos. It is a world of whispers, patterns, echoes. The silence has not vanished. It now lives within every movement, every orbit, every glowing flame. You carry it too, even now, in the way your breath slows when you stare at night sky, in the way your heart stills when you stand in darkness, listening for something older than language. And so the womb of space stretches onward, no longer an empty cradle, but a place of births, not a void, but a gallery, not a stage waiting for a play, but a tapestry still being woven, each galaxy a thread, each star a knot, each planet a bead, strung carefully on invisible lines of story and gravity and light. The universe is not a finished thing. It is a making. It is still being made. You're floating through its early verses before the chorus has begun, but you can already feel the rhythm tightening, the melody rising. Something else is forming now, quietly, distant. In the spiral arms of a newborn galaxy, a modest star is flickering into steadiness. Around it, dust curls like ribbon in slow motion. The disk flattens, warms, clumps. Tiny stones kiss each other and cling. The clinging becomes accretion. The stones become worlds, and one of those worlds, blue and bare, is already turning beneath that gentle sun. Still molten, still violent, but destined for oceans. You're near it now. You pass over its surface, feeling the thrum of a world not yet alive, but already pregnant with it. It does not know itself yet. It cannot. But within its rock and heat and waterless wind, all the ingredients are waiting, for warmth, for chemistry, for time, for the right kind of silence. You stay close. You know the story is only just beginning. You know that even this world is not an ending, but a folding forward of the same ancient hush, the same patient breath, the same timeless tilt that started it all. And beneath its crust, in darkness untouched by sky, the first molecules begin to meet. And beneath its crust, in darkness untouched by sky, the first molecules begin to meet. They do not know what they are. They do not know they are beginning something. But they turn toward each other like magnets humming through silence, drawn not by will, but by the logic of shape, by the soft geometry of attraction. Heat pulses through the cracks in the young Earth's skin, rising from vents hidden beneath primordial oceans not yet formed, whispering minerals into the void. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane, ingredients born from volcanic breath and comet ice, swirl in the thick hot air, dense as soup, restless as dream. There is no life yet, no cell, no eye, no hunger. But chemistry has begun to wonder. Within tiny pools of warmth, in droplets that cling to stone and steam, molecules begin to combine. Not once, not quickly, but over and over, through eons of tides and chance and repetition. Chains of carbon link, unlink, relink. Simple sugars bond with shy acids. Fatty molecules curl into spheres, protecting their tender insides from the world outside. These bubbles are not alive, but they are something new. Vessels that hold what could become memory, what could become self. Time folds over itself here. Millions of years pass in the breath between two waves. Lightning cracks a sky heavy with possibility. Energy stirs the cauldron again and again, each strike like a key pressed gently against a lock not yet shaped. And somewhere in that endless patience, a spark lands where it must. A self-copying molecule, humble, inefficient and miraculous, begins to duplicate. It makes errors. It tries again. It learns not through thought but through persistence. With each copy, it inches closer to coherence. With each mistake, it becomes more refined, and so life begins. Not with a cry, not with a light, but with a whisper in water. A strand of information protected by a bubble, floating in the warm cradle of an ancient sea. The earth, once molten and violent, now rocks these first cradles in waves no eye can see, no hand can feel. These early lives do not dream. They do not know they are alive, but they divide, they replicate, they spread. And in their spreading, the planet begins to change. What was once stone becomes soil. What was once chemistry becomes hunger, competition, cooperation. Biology is born. You float through this blooming tide, your awareness swimming between single-celled wanderers. They are simple, yes, but they are not alone. They sense each other. They leave trails. They respond. The first senses are born not to see, not to hear, but to feel. Gradients of temperature, pockets of nourishment, the faint warning of a nearby rival. These tiny lives press outward, not with ambition, but with purpose, to keep going. And in keeping going, they transform the world that holds them. Some begin to eat light. They stretch strange arms toward the sun, harvesting energy from the sky. These photosynthetic ancestors are not noble, they are not aware, but they are revolutionary. They breathe out oxygen as waste, and the oxygen begins to gather. At first it disappears into rocks, into iron. The planet rusts under the burden. But the breath keeps coming. The air begins to change. A poison to many of the older microbes, oxygen forces evolution's hand. Some die, others adapt. The stage is being set for complexity. The oceans swell with unseen empires. Colonies of bacteria form towering mats, stromatolites, reef-like cities of slime and light. They are alive with cooperation, pulsing with layered memory. And deep in the waters, cells begin to merge, not consume, not destroy, merge. One cell shelters another, a partnership, a new kind of living. The first eukaryotes are born, cells with inner rooms, with compartments, with the architecture to build something more. You pass through one of these living cathedrals, marveling at the elegance of its interior, the way a mitochondrion hums in its tiny chamber, the way the nucleus holds the script of life like a candle in the dark. It takes billions of years to reach this point, and billions more before cells agree to work together, to specialize, to trust. Multicellularity does not come easily. It is a radical act, to give up autonomy in service of something larger. But it begins. Seaweeds ripple in the shallows, sponges rise from the ocean floor like breathing stone. Simple animals, soft and strange, bloom in the deep, jellyfish drifting like thought, worms tunneling through mud, bodies with no eyes but a sense of the world. You float now in this Eden of alien life. It is quiet. There are no bones, no voices, only the slow unfolding of form, symmetry, segmentation, the invention of mouths. The earth watches, silent and turning. The atmosphere thickens with breath. The oceans teem with motion. Still, no one looks up. Still, no one wonders. Not yet. Then, in a burst, quick compared to all that came before, life explodes. The Cambrian. A bloom of innovation, of variation, of form. Eyes evolve, limbs, jaws, shells, teeth, colour, conflict. All the patterns of life you now know. Predator and prey, hunter and shelter, swarm and solitude, begin here. The seas are full of faces for the first time, faces that can see, faces that can follow, faces that can flee. And within that flood of newness, the arms race begins. Every creature a question asked of the world, and every generation an answer, revised and returned. You move through this brightness like a shadow, watching trilobites march across ancient seafloors, watching nautiloids spiral through shallow seas. The earth is vibrant now, wild and alive, and the silence that once held everything now echoes with the first soft noises of movement, friction, splash. Light plays on the shells of creatures who do not yet dream of stars, and somewhere, in a backwater tidal pool, a fin twitches into something more. A spine stiffens, a lung gulps air, and life begins to reach upward, from water to land to sky. But not yet. The oceans still hold dominion. The land is barren, the sky empty but for clouds. The green of plants has not yet spread its lace across stone. The songs of birds and insects have not yet been written, and still the breath of life deepens. Still the earth waits, patient, cradling its story in layers of rock and time. You feel it, don't you? The shape of it. The long climb from hydrogen to heartbeat. From silence to self. You're not above this. You're within it. You're the memory of stars, the dust of fire, the echo of light set free. And somewhere ahead, not far now, eyes will open for the first time and see the sky, not just as ceiling, but as question. Hands will reach not just to build, but to wonder. The earth, that once lay molten and silent, will whisper its story through mouths that can give it name, and beneath your drifting presence, in the warmth of a tidal bay, something stirs, a creature that does not yet know the word awareness, but carries it hidden in the twist of its spine. And beneath your drifting presence, in the warmth of a tidal bay, something stirs, a creature that does not yet know the word awareness, but carries it hidden in the twist of its spine. It is not grand. It does not roar or rise. It wriggles. A soft, boneless body testing the border between water and something else. Its cells remember the sea, but its hunger pulls it forward, toward the edge of the tide, toward the dry breath of land. There is no plan. There is only sensation, pressure, change. But that change will echo across eons. This is how it happens. Not all at once, but in patient, trembling increments. The creatures that crawl do not mean to leave the ocean. They are drawn by chance, by food left behind in shrinking pools, by shelter in warm mud, by escape from a finned predator lurking just beneath the surface. Limbs stiffen, lungs grow more efficient, eyes learn to squint against sunlight, skin thickens against dry air. Each adaptation is a compromise, a fragile experiment that could fail, and many do, but some survive, and survival becomes story. Land, once silent, now feels footsteps, not loud, not steady, but real. Life begins to etch its breath into stone. Mosses creep across rock, softening its silence. Ferns unfurl like green firework smoke. Insects emerge, tiny architects of motion, building wings from heighten and instinct. Their hum is the first music of air. Amphibians slink into shadowed groves, half in water, half out, carrying the memory of both in their bones. Reptiles follow, scales glinting in the sun. The dance of evolution speeds up, triggered by this new challenge. Gravity, dryness, distance. The earth becomes a canvas, and life, a painter with infinite patience. The air thickens with oxygen, stirred by trees that inhale carbon and exhale sky. Forests rise, not yet the ones you know, but immense strange jungles of towering lycopods and spore-clouding fungi. The world breathes deeper, and life responds with scale. Insects grow monstrous, dragonflies with wingspans wider than hawks, centipedes as long as logs. The pressure of survival and abundance of air allow extravagance. Each organism is an answer to the environment's question, how will you persist, And then come the giants. Dinosaurs do not begin as thunder. They begin as small, nimble things, quick-footed, feathered, cautious. But time favours those who adapt, and the conditions ripen. Earth's pulse grows steady. Climate warms, continents drift. Volcanoes stir nutrients into the wind. And across millions of years, the descendants of those early reptilian pioneers evolve into titans. Massive bodies, trembling footsteps, teeth like curved blades, eyes with pupils shaped for depth. Dinosaurs dominate not by cruelty, but by harmony. They fit the Earth's rhythms perfectly. You soar now above a world in motion. Herds thunder across fern-covered plains. Predators stalk through cycads and conifers. Eggs lie buried beneath sand and moss, waiting for heat, waiting to continue the line. The sky is filled with leathery wings and feathered gliders. The sea too remembers its own monsters, ichthyosaurs with moon-bright eyes, plesiosaurs with long serpentine necks. This is an age of confidence. The earth blooms wildly. Life stretches its limbs and bellows its presence. Even the silence hums with complexity. But nothing lasts forever. The same earth that births life tests it. Beneath the forests and seas, pressure builds. A rock the size of a mountain hurtles from the edge of space. When it strikes, the world tilts. Fire sweeps across the sky. Dust clouds the sun for months. The great reptiles fall. The ferns die back. The silence returns. Not fully, not forever, but as a reminder, change is the only constant. And yet, from this ruin, something smaller rises. In the shadows of the fallen giants, mammals begin to multiply. They had always been there, mouse-like, burrowing, cautious, watching, waiting. Now, with the canopy cleared and the predators gone, they emerge. Fur warms fragile bodies. Milk feeds helpless young. Teeth adapt to crush, tear, grind. Brains begin to swell. Intelligence inches forward, not as a leap, but as a steady pulse. These creatures do not dominate with size or speed. They survive by learning. Forests regrow, rivers meander, mountains rise and wear away. The earth, patient as ever, offers its stage again. Birds take to the skies, descendants of feathered dinosaurs. Flowers bloom, courting insects with colour and scent. Bees dance. Trees share signals underground. The web grows dense and shimmering. The world you know begins to take shape, not in an instant, but in the slow calligraphy of eras. And among the mammals, one lineage rises quietly, marked not by strength, but by curiosity. Apes, then hominins, then something stranger, something that does not run fastest or climb highest, something that walks upright, awkwardly graceful, something that begins to shape stone, something that looks at fire and does not flee, but learns to keep it, something that draws in the sand with fingers and wonders what it means. This is not dominance. Not yet. This is awareness taking its first long breath. You drift close now, hovering above a world beginning to recognize itself. A tribe huddles near a fire, eyes glowing with reflection. One of them looks up at the stars, not just to see them, but to ask. There is a wordlessness in the question, a wondering that echoes through the whole body. What is this? What are we? Why does anything exist? The fire crackles. Sparks rise toward constellations carved into the sky by imagination. The hush has not left. It lingers in the pause between thoughts, in the breath before story. You feel it now, not in the void, but in the wondering, not in the atoms, but in the awe. The universe that once unfolded in silence now speaks through minds that can remember it. And deep in one of those minds, a new kind of pattern begins to take shape. Symbols, myths, numbers, stars mapped with sticks and stones. The earth hums beneath bare feet. A voice rises in the dark, telling a tale not of now, but of before. Before the river, before the hunt, before the sun. A story of beginning, of creation, of fire stolen or spoken or sung into being. Not science, not yet, but not far. The silence listens. It remembers itself in every tale. And as the first languages stretch their arms toward the sky, the hush of the cosmos waits, not gone, only transformed into the breath between words, the stillness between stars, the moment a child hears the beginning of a story and leans just slightly forward, and the earth turns, and the stars remain, and the questions rise, like smoke, like prayer, like the first note of a song not yet complete. And the earth turns, and the stars remain, and the questions rise, like smoke, like prayer, like the first note of a song not yet complete. Firelight dances on the walls of a cave, flickering over hands that paint stories in ochre and ash. A mammoth with curved tusks, a deer mid-leap, a spiral that might be the sun, or might be a map, or might be the beginning of thought itself. These hands do not write words yet, but they remember. They trace memory into stone. They mark time not by the tick of clocks, but by the pulse of seasons, the rhythm of the hunt, the return of stars to the same corner of sky. Outside, night leans in. The constellations shimmer, unchanged. Orion still hunts. The Pleiades still gather. But now eyes look up and begin to notice. The sky is no longer just a ceiling. It is a calendar, a compass, a question. Around ancient fires, humans tell stories of how it all began. Each story different, yet strangely familiar. A cosmic egg cracks open. A god exhales stars. A serpent coils through the void, shedding its skin into worlds. A tree grows from darkness, its roots in silence, its branches in light. These are not falsehoods. They are metaphors that remember truths the tongue does not yet have the math to say. You float among them. These first dreamers, these thinkers wrapped in animal skin, their minds vast even as their world is small. They have not split atoms or mapped galaxies, but they have cracked open the shell of wonder. They do not know the universe is expanding, but they know that everything moves. The moon grows and shrinks, the tides rise and fall, the sun dies each night and is reborn. Time is not linear here, it circles, birth, death, return. The same breath taken again and again, deeper each time. They do not have telescopes, but they have ritual. Ceremony becomes their instrument for seeing the unseen. They mark equinoxes with stones, solstices with fire. They arrange bones and starlight into meaning, and always, underneath it all, the same ancient murmur, "Why is there something instead of nothing?" Their answers are mythic, poetic, whispered in verses carved into the rhythm of drums. The sky is the body of a sleeping god. The stars are holes in a blanket between this world and another. The breath of creation was a sound so low it could only be heard by mountains. A sacred word was spoken into the void, and it became matter. Sound becomes form. Word becomes world. You hear these stories rise like mist from the mouths of elders, and in each tale there is a fragment of truth, not of data, but of recognition. They know that silence came first. They know that becoming followed. They know in the marrow of their myth that everything is connected. And connection becomes civilization. Villages become cities. Language refines. Symbols sharpen into letters, and letters into laws. The sky remains above it all, faithful unchanged, but now charted, measured. Farmers turn their gaze upward not just for meaning, but for harvest. Priests track the heavens with instruments made of bronze and string. The moon predicts tides, the stars predict rains. The rhythm of the cosmos begins to anchor the rhythm of human life. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats rise like mountains toward constellations. In Egypt, temples are carved in alignment with solstice suns. In India, hymns echo with the idea of a universe born from vibration, a single note swelling into multiplicity. In China, the Tao speaks of the nameless beginning, the uncarved block from which all things flow. In every culture, the idea repeats, from stillness, something, from nothing, form, from the breath, the world. And yet, even as belief deepens, a new kind of curiosity begins to wake, not to replace myth, but to walk beside it, a hunger not just to feel the divine, but to understand the machinery behind the stars. In Greece, philosophers gaze upward and ask not only who made the heavens, but how they move. Pythagoras hears harmony in planetary motion. Democritus imagines atoms dancing in the void. Thales proposes that water is the first substance, not because it is holy, but because it is everywhere. These early scientists are still mystics in many ways, but their wonder takes on shape. It seeks structure. It begins to test the world gently. You pass among them. Robes brush in stone, chalk on slate, the murmur of logic beginning to thread through the roar of myth. They are not trying to banish mystery. They are trying to make it speak, to let the stars answer. And as the centuries pass, the stars begin to whisper back. In Alexandria, scrolls unroll into sky maps and treatises. In Baghdad, algebra is born under desert moons. In ancient India, the concept of zero, a symbol of nothing, is named, held, respected. And that symbol, that hollow seed, becomes the cornerstone of all that will come. For it is only when nothing is understood that everything can be truly measured. It is only when emptiness is given form that form itself becomes visible. The silence has changed now. It is no longer a lack of knowledge. It is the space where knowledge waits, a pause before revelation, a breath before clarity. And in that pause, through shadowed centuries, thinkers build bridges between past and future, between myth and math. Galileo lifts his telescope and sees moons orbiting Jupiter, not Earth. Copernicus redraws the cosmos, placing the sun at the center. Newton writes laws so precise they feel eternal. Gravity, motion, inertia, the breath of the universe made visible, and still the question lingers. What came before the first motion? What force lit the spark? Science does not quiet the mystery. It deepens it. Each new answer peels back a layer, revealing a deeper darkness underneath. The stars are no longer gods, but they are no less wondrous. The universe is no longer centered on Earth, but we are no less connected. Instead, we become smaller and more miraculous. Dust from ancient explosions, now walking and wondering and writing formulas in the dark. You hover above the modern world now, watching minds accelerate. Telescopes grow larger. Particle colliders spin matter to the edge of understanding. Quantum theory unravels the fabric of certainty. Space stretches, time bends. The Big Bang emerges, not as a myth, but as a model, a singularity, dense and hot beyond all imagining, from which space and time unfolded. And even still, behind that fire, a question persists. Quieter now, but insistent. Why? Why should anything exist at all? And beneath that question, another, more tender. What if the silence never ended? What if it simply learned to speak through light? The hush of the beginning has not vanished. It lives in the pause between particle and wave, in the tremble of probabilities, in the gap between theory and truth. It waits in black holes, in dark matter, in the corners of thought where logic blurs into poetry. And still, we ask. We build satellites and send them past the edge of planets. We decode the song of the background radiation. We weigh the void itself. We ask the universe to tell us its name. And sometimes, quietly, it does. Not in language, but in pattern. Not in answers, but in echoes. You drift beside the latest thinkers, cosmologists, philosophers, physicists. Some speak of multiverses, some speak of dimensions curled too tightly to see. Some believe in simulation, others in symmetry, others in entropy, winding backward toward order. Each idea a vessel, filled with light and longing. But even the most advanced minds return to the same still question. Why something instead of nothing? They do not all agree, but they share the wonder. They breathe it like air. And that breath, soft, reverent, persistent, is the newest form of the ancient silence. And somewhere, between the stars and the equations, a quiet possibility stirs again. The thought that maybe it wasn't a bang, but a breath. Long, slow, and sacred. Not an explosion, but an exhalation. Not chaos, but emergence. Maybe the universe didn't begin in fire and fury, but in a moment of unspeakable stillness folding outward. A ripple in what was not yet space, a tilt in what was not yet time. Maybe that first breath is still happening, stretching across galaxies, through the lungs of stars and the thoughts of dreamers, whispering its presence in every atom that aches to understand itself. This idea lingers now, fragile but radiant, among those who study the universe not only as a structure, but as a mystery, a breath, a wave, a soft awakening. Quantum fields fluctuate, not in emptiness but in potential. Even the vacuum is not void, but seething with virtual particles blinking into and out of being like sparks in a storm too fine for eyes. In this trembling foam of existence, the seeds of everything hide, matter and antimatter, gravity and light, time and uncertainty. The closer we look, the less solid things seem. Particles are not things, they are events, probabilities, ripples in the invisible. You float among the theorists who dare to imagine this. Physicists tracing the invisible code beneath reality, unweaving the world into patterns of symmetry and spin. String theorists speak of tiny vibrating filaments, each note a particle, each resonance a law. Brains, dimensions, multiverses, ideas bloom like galaxies, bold, wild, unfinished. What if there are 11 dimensions and we live in only 3? What if other universes bump against ours like bubbles in an unseen sea? What if we are just one verse in a much greater song? But even these grand models cannot escape the oldest question. Why does the song sing at all? Why should there be a field to fluctuate, a law to follow, a string to hum? Why should there be anything with the capacity to be? And quietly, beyond the whiteboards and particle beams, some begin to wonder, is the root not physical, but something stranger? Consciousness enters the conversation like a ghost remembered. For a long time it had been set aside, too elusive, too subjective, too resistant to math. But it returns now through the back door of quantum observation. In the double-slit experiment, particles seem to behave differently when watched. Waves collapse into particles only under scrutiny. Reality changes when measured. This is not proof that mind creates matter, but it is enough to ask the question, is the observer part of the origin? You drift gently across these thoughts, not as a scientist, but as something older, as wonder itself. Through meditation halls and star observatories, temples and laboratories, the same awe persists. Whether kneeling in prayer or calibrating a telescope, there is something common in the posture of those who seek, a leaning forward, a listening. In that quiet reach, science and spirituality brush fingertips, not to explain each other, but to nod in recognition. Both have always asked the same question, in different tongues. What is the first cause? Some philosophers speak of necessity, that perhaps the universe simply must exist, that nothingness is not more natural than being, only more tempting to the limited mind. Others argue for contingency, that everything we see depends on something else, and thus there must be a foundation that simply is, an unmoved mover, a timeless truth, not a person, not a force, just existence itself, pure and whole. And still others whisper something softer, that perhaps existence is not logical at all, it is beautiful, that the reason there is something instead of nothing might be the same reason a musician writes a song, because it can be written, because it longs to be heard. You're floating now in a space where logic yields to lyricism, where mathematics and metaphor spiral around each other like twin galaxies. Perhaps the universe was not made for a purpose, but is itself the purpose, not a creation, but a becoming, not an artifact, but an act, a breath continuing forever, inwards and outwards at once. Entropy increases, complexity rises, and through it all awareness flickers into being, not by accident but as a natural consequence of time's deepening. And this awareness, this consciousness, is not separate from the cosmos, but the cosmos becomes self-aware. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the universe to know itself." And maybe that is not just poetic. Maybe it is literal. Maybe when we ask the question of why anything exists, it is the universe asking its own reflection, seeking not explanation, but intimacy. You drift through this realization slowly, as if it must be inhaled, not solved. That the act of asking is part of the answer. That in the pulse of your own thoughts, in the wonder that wakes behind your eyes, the origin is not just remembered, it is continued. That perhaps the question doesn't need to be answered with words, but with presence. And still, there are those who suggest another vision, that we are living inside a simulation, not metaphorically, but literally. That our reality is information-based, rendered moment to moment, like pixels only drawn when looked at. That some intelligence, ancient or future, programmed the laws of physics as parameters, and we are the emergent phenomena of that code. To them, the Big Bang is a boot-up, the cosmic background radiation a system echo. The constants of nature just tuning values, finely adjusted to produce life. But even if that were true, even if we are simulated, another question arises immediately, like a mirror within a mirror. Then who built the simulation? And what exists beyond it? There is always another layer, and perhaps that's the point. Not to find an edge, but to realize there may be none. The universe, like a dream, may unfold infinitely inward. Each answer leads not to a final truth, but to a deeper wondering. And each wondering adds something new, a layer, a meaning, a colour to the canvas. You're floating again now, not in science, not in myth, but in silence, the original medium. The same silence that cradled the first breath. The same silence that curled between equations and stars. It remains, not behind everything, but within. Not as emptiness, but as invitation. You feel it between your thoughts, beneath your heartbeat, folded into every second. It is not passive, it is presence. And in that silence you hear the next echo forming, not a conclusion, but a continuation, not a theory, but a story still unfolding. The breath that began it all has not ended. It flows through galaxies and neurons alike, through black holes and lullabies, through you and every eye that looks up at the night sky and quietly, reverently asks, not for a final answer, but for closeness, for understanding not through conclusion, but through contact, a gentle meeting between self and source. The question is not a demand, it is a kind of touch, a reaching that reveals the shape of what we seek, even if its name escapes us. And in this reaching, we shape the universe as much as it shapes us. We look into the darkness, and the darkness in its own way looks back, not as a stranger, but as something we've always known. From the earliest laws written into stone to the most delicate wave functions collapsing in labs, every form of seeking has had something sacred at its center. Whether it is a god or a particle or a principle, all are ways of naming the same pull, a pull toward coherence, toward sense, toward the moment when everything that is somehow fits. This desire for pattern is not arbitrary, it is ancestral, carved into bone, encoded in neurons. Life does not just survive, it seeks symmetry. From the spiral of DNA to the helix of galaxies, form repeats. Ratios reappear, meaning echoes. And so we chase those echoes, across deserts and across decades, through mathematics and through myth. We follow them into the atom, hoping to find the smallest unit of truth, the indivisible. But each time we think we've arrived at the bottom, the proton, the neutron, the quark, the floor falls again, revealing something smaller, stranger, more blurred. Particles become waves, and waves become probabilities, and probabilities become a mirror, not showing us what is, but what could be, until we look, and in the looking, solidify it. But the same is true at scale. We peer into the furthest reaches of space, expecting to find the end, a wall, a border, an edge to all things. But what we find is curve, not corner. What we find is expansion, not through something, but as something. Space is not pushing into a surrounding void. Space is the void, unfolding into more of itself. The universe is not in space. The universe is space, and it grows, not like a balloon within a room, but like the room itself stretching outward, the dimensions widening without reference. Time does not tick from a cosmic grandfather clock. It emerges from change, from entropy, from heat becoming spread. And so when the universe was hot and uniform, time had no arrow, no story. It is the imbalance, the fall from perfect symmetry, that gave rise to time's flow. In a way, time was born the moment perfection broke, and we, beings of imperfection, live downstream of that first crack, that sacred fault line where symmetry bent just enough for stories to be born. And what are we, if not stories told by the universe to itself? Each life a sentence, each breath a syllable, each thought a vibration in the cosmic skin. We do not float outside the equation. We are variables within it. Not observers peering in, but participants embedded. Your heartbeat is not separate from the stars. It was composed in them. The calcium in your teeth, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your every cell, all forged in the hearts of ancient stars that lived and died long before the earth cooled. You do not carry stardust in you. You are stardust remembering itself. This remembering is the quiet miracle. Memory did not arrive with words or even with brains. It began when matter began to repeat itself, when molecules began to copy, when a spiral of information began to preserve a record of what came before. From that spiral, from that delicate double helix, came everything that learns. Trees remember seasons, birds remember flight paths, the body remembers warmth, and the mind remembers the stars. Even if we forget their names, we remember the feeling of looking up and knowing we belong to something older, wider, more patient than time. Even the laws that bind this universe, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, are memory of a kind. Patterns that held from the beginning. Rules that whispered themselves into every corner of being and never broke. It is through these faithful laws that matter assembled, that stars ignited, that planets spun, that oceans swelled, that life stirred. The same rules that govern galaxies govern your muscles, your vision, your thoughts. The same symmetry that shaped electrons shaped the spiral of your fingerprint. And still, the question echoes beneath it all. Why these laws? Why this set of rules and not another? Why a universe where life is possible, where awareness can flicker into being? Some call this fine-tuning, others say necessity. Some invoke multiverse theories, infinite realities where every possible configuration exists and we're simply in the one where we can ask about it. But even if that's true, the wonder doesn't shrink. It multiplies. Because then the mystery is not just this universe, it is all universes, and the very ground from which they rise. What is that ground? Call it the void, call it the field, call it God, call it the unspeakable. Every label fails, but every attempt is meaningful. Because each one is a step toward intimacy, toward communion. Even when the labels contradict, the longing is the same. A longing not just to know, but to be known, to be held in understanding, to feel that the space we occupy is not accident, but presence. And maybe that presence is not behind the universe, but within it. Maybe it's not a hand that lit the spark, but the spark itself. Maybe divinity is not a force imposed from outside, but the name we give to the light that wakes inside all things. The breath in the dust, the stillness in the motion, the awareness that sits silently behind your eyes watching, feeling, wondering. You drift now not through stars but through selves, not through galaxies but through consciousness, individual, collective, ancient, from the first twitch of a jellyfish to the last breath of a poet, from the first ritual fire to the glow of a screen in the dark, every flame, every question, every ache to understand, a signal that says, I am here, I am listening, I want to know, and the universe through each of these signals, through each of you, responds, not with an answer, but with a soft widening, a breath, an opening into the next mystery, the next unfolding, the next layer of being. You're not at the end of this story. You're not even in the middle. You're at the edge of the next word, at the edge of the next word. A word still unspoken, still gathering form in the hush between thoughts. It waits, not impatiently, but deliberately, within the silence that threads through every atom, every question, every quiet glance skyward. And perhaps, in some deep and timeless way, the universe has always been a sentence in progress, a line not written by a hand but by unfolding itself, not printed on paper but etched into the very shape of time. This next word may not be language, it may be a discovery or a moment of stillness. It may be the way two minds meet across a bridge of understanding. It may be the birth of a child, the death of a star, the sudden quiet that falls over a mountain just before sunrise. Whatever it is, it carries within it the weight of all that came before, a wave of meaning cresting forward through existence, searching always for new forms to take. And so we live, not after the beginning, but inside it. Not in the wake of creation, but in its current. The Big Bang was not a past event sealed behind us. It was a threshold, a doorway. And even now, the echo of that breath still moves through space, stretching it wider, deeper, colder. Every second, more room opens. Every second, more time is born. And with that time, more chances for light to gather, for matter to meet, for life to wake and wonder. The expansion is not only outward, it is inward too. For as far as galaxies drift from each other, new thoughts appear in minds like yours, new ways of seeing, new questions to ask. You are part of that stretching, not an observer of it, but a participant. Your consciousness is a continuation of that same emergence. The same spark that set fire to stars now burns behind your eyes, not as flame, but as awareness. And what is awareness, if not the most intricate pattern the universe has ever shaped? Atoms that once spun alone, random and indifferent, have learned to speak in the language of attention, to build neurons and brains and minds capable of asking about their own becoming. You're not merely built from stardust, you're built from the memory of stars, organized into thought, emotion, dream. You are what the cosmos looks like when it begins to recognize itself. We say the universe is vast, and it is, but scale is not only measured in distance. There is a depth inside you that mirrors the depth between galaxies. The distance between two people truly understanding one another is sometimes as far as the space between suns, and yet, sometimes, it closes. Sometimes, we reach across that silence and find, waiting there, a voice not our own that still speaks in a familiar tone. That is wonder. That is communion. That is the universe catching a glimpse of itself, reflected in the eyes of another. In this way, the story continues, not in the stars alone, but in stories told beside firelight, in theories written in chalk, in lullabies sung without knowing why they comfort. Each of these is a flare, a signal, a gesture of becoming. We long not only to exist, but to matter. And we long not only to matter, but to understand what it means that we do. Beneath every pursuit, art, science, love, is the same hunger, to know what we are part of, to know why the silence began to speak, and still we listen. Through telescopes tuned to ancient light, through poems that turn inward, through algorithms decoding the sky, through stillness and breath and a child's first look at the stars, we listen not only for answers, but for the reassurance that the asking itself is enough, that to question is to belong, and perhaps that's the most beautiful idea of all, that existence is not a test or a puzzle to solve, but an invitation to witness, to feel, to respond, to play your note in the great unfolding. The cosmos is not waiting for you to understand it. It is waiting for you to be within it, to live, to love, to echo its vastness in the depth of your smallness. Because small does not mean insignificant. Small means detailed. Small means intricate. Small means necessary. Just as a single atom holds the pattern of a star, so too does your life carry the pattern of the whole, in miniature but no less sacred. You're not the purpose of the universe, but you're not outside its purpose either. You're a phrase in its song, a glimmer in its endless wave, a consciousness woven from particles older than time, dreaming of what might still come. And what comes next is not known. The universe is not finished. It is not even stable. Stars will die. Galaxies will drift further and further apart. Heat will spread thinner until there are no gradients left to feed motion. This is the far future. The heat death. The silence at the end of expansion. But even this is not a true ending. It is a transformation. Just as the stars came from silence, perhaps silence too will learn to become something else. There are theories, speculative, poetic, bold, that the universe may one day collapse and be born again. That entropy itself could recycle into new order. That time might curve back upon itself. Or that this is only one bubble in a sea of others, each universe blooming from its own breath, its own hush, its own law. We do not know, and perhaps we never will. But the not knowing is its own kind of truth, because in that space we remain open, we remain seekers, we remain like that first flicker of light, moving outward into a vastness we cannot contain, but which contains us, and we carry that movement forward in thought, in creation, in every moment we dare to ask again, what is this? What are we? Why does anything exist? The question returns, not because it has failed to be answered, but because it never needed to be. It is not a riddle. It is a doorway. And each time we step through, we arrive at something new. Another word, another whisper, another widening. The breath continues. And ahead of you now, not far, the stars bend just slightly, as if preparing to reveal something even deeper, and the stars bend just slightly, as if preparing to reveal something even deeper, something tucked beneath the fabric of what we call real. Not a secret in the sense of something hidden, but a quiet truth that has always been there, unnoticed, waiting for us to become still enough to feel it. This bending is not just of light, but of understanding, a gentle warping of perspective that allows a glimpse beyond the surface into the pattern behind the pattern. For there is always a pattern, even in the dark, especially in the dark. In the gaps between galaxies, in the silence between sounds, in the spaces where we once assumed nothing lived, there is form, rhythm, intention. The ancient light that first broke free from its prison of plasma, the cosmic microwave background, still stretches across the sky, cool and quiet like the ghost of a lullaby. And when we map it, when we listen to it, we find not randomness, but faint ripples, subtle variations that tell of the earliest breaths of the universe. They're not loud, they're not sharp, but they are precise, measured, relic echoes of a time when all was heat and potential. And here lies a strange, humbling truth. This oldest light still touches us, even now, as you breathe, as you think, as you dream. Photons born shortly after time itself began are slipping through you, brushing against your skin, whispering stories older than language. They are messengers from a time when matter was young, when space was barely awake, when all the elements of your body were still scattered through the haze. You do not have to look far to find the beginning. It is passing through you, always. This background radiation, this ancient shine, is not loud enough to hear with ears, but we have learned to listen in other ways. Radio telescopes sweep the sky, capturing the faint glow, decoding its gentle static. And in that static we see the blueprint of what would become stars, galaxies, life. Tiny variations in temperature, only millionths of a degree, marked the places where gravity would one day weave structure, where light would one day gather, where you would one day wonder. Imagine that. The shape of everything, embedded in heat, the texture of the cosmos sketched in thermal wrinkles. This is the kind of miracle that does not call attention to itself, yet redefines everything. The universe was never blank, never flat. It was always leaning, always curling, always pressing its thumb into the clay. And those imprints became suns and planets and cells and thought. You are floating through that afterglow now, not in space, but in memory. The memory the universe keeps not in words but in temperature, in light, in pattern. The memory that shaped your every cell before your name had form. You do not remember it with your mind. You remember it by existing, by waking, by wondering. Your life is not a break from that beginning. It is a continuation. And yet the background light is fading. As the universe expands, it cools. The wavelengths stretch, the photons lose energy, the glow grows fainter. One day, far in the future, that warmth will slip beyond detection. The echo of the beginning will still be there, but no longer audible to our instruments. It will become silence again, not absence, but depth, the hush that held the breath, returning. But even then the story will not be lost, because it lives in what was shaped by it, in the galaxies still spinning, in the chemistry of oceans, in the breath of creatures that once looked up and named the stars. The origin is not a place, it is direction, a motion, a quality that lingers in everything it touched. And light. Light is the thread that connects it all, not only as a wave or a particle or an equation, but as a witness. Light has seen everything. It was there before you were born, and it will travel long after you're gone. Light touches all things and leaves none unchanged. It is the quiet companion to matter, the herald of visibility, the painter of form. Through light, the universe tells its story, not as a shout but as a shimmer. And the story it tells is not only vast, it is intimate. It does not only speak of quasars and galaxies, it speaks of fireflies, of reflection in eyes, of the way morning light curves across a room soft as memory. It speaks in radiance and in shadow, in the golden warmth of a star and in the cool gleam of moonlit water. Light does not judge what it illuminates, it simply reveals, and so it reveals us. It reveals that we are not separate from the stars, but siblings to them. That we are not visitors in this cosmos, but expressions of it. That the atoms we carry, the minds we wield, the feelings we cradle, all of it is made from the same unfolding that sculpted the sky. And that recognition, that moment when we see not only the universe, but ourselves in the universe, is the return of light to its source. Perhaps this is why we keep building tools to see further, deeper. Telescopes like dreams pressed into metal, detectors that catch particles born in the heart of stars, algorithms that find patterns hidden in the noise. We are not chasing spectacle, we are chasing memory. The memory of what it felt like to belong to something so vast, so luminous, so patient. And through every new glimpse, every new map, we're learning to remember better. And as we remember, we begin to change. Light doesn't only reveal what is, it also reveals what can be. It guides not just our vision, but our path. Through it, we trace the curvature of truth. Through it, we find clarity in the dust. And through it, we understand that even the smallest flicker, even a candle in the dark, is part of the same radiance that once lit the cosmos. You are part of that flicker. And even now, as you drift in the hush between stars, feeling the breath of ancient photons on your skin, something in you leans forward, not physically, not mentally, but in the heart, a quiet leaning, the same leaning the universe once made when stillness gave way to becoming, and ahead, just there, beyond the veil of night, you sense the shape of something yet unseen, and ahead, just there, beyond the veil of night, you sense the shape of something yet unseen, not with eyes, but with attention, with that inner stillness that listens rather than looks. It is not a brightness that draws you, but a gravity, a beckoning in the dark, and you begin to understand. Darkness is not the opposite of light, but its companion, not a mistake to be corrected, but a presence to be honoured. Without darkness, light has no canvas. Without night, stars have no voice. The shadow is not silence. It is the space in which the whisper can be heard. You float now into the deep, ancient dark between galaxies, the great oceans of distance where no sun shines, where no planet circles, where no warmth drifts. It is easy to imagine this as emptiness, but it is not. It is fullness without form, silence without sleep. For even here, particles move, waves ripple, gravity stretches its invisible threads from star to star. And through this darkness, the light from the earlier stars continues to travel, older now, redshifted, cooled, softened, but still singing. This is the paradox of space. It is filled with light, and yet mostly dark, a contradiction only at first glance. Because light does not fill every corner, it travels, but it also fades. It can be scattered, swallowed, stretched, until it no longer warms or glows, and what remains between? A darkness ancient and immense. It is not absence, it is memory. The night sky is not just what we see, it is what we no longer see, a record of what has already passed, what has moved too far, what has faded from our reach. The darkness is not a void, but a veil, holding the time before now like a mother cradling dreams she once had. And so we ask, even now, why is the night sky dark? This question, asked by children and philosophers alike, is deeper than it seems. If the universe is infinite, and stars are scattered throughout it, why doesn't the sky blaze in every direction? The answer is both beautiful and humbling, because the universe is not static. It is not eternal in the way we once imagined. It is expanding, and with that expansion, the light stretches, dims, reddens, cools. Some stars are too far. Their light has not reached us yet. Others have died. Their light has passed us by. The darkness we see is not failure but finitude, not absence but evidence of motion, of change, of time. You drift through that darkness now, and for a moment it feels familiar, not frightening, not alien, but like something you have known since before you had a name, because you come from this. You were born in the cradle of this blackness, swaddled in its calm. The night sky is your ancestry, each star a sibling, each shadow a pause that shaped your story. You are not made for only light. You are made for contrast, and the universe knows this. It builds with contrast, not just in colour or heat, but in meaning. Galaxies do not form in uniform fields. They arise from imbalance, from slight imperfections in density, from shadows that leaned a little more and light that gathered a little less. The stars owe their birth to the graininess of the early cosmos, a texture that offered just enough unevenness for gravity to gather and form. Even brilliance is born from imperfection, especially brilliance. In this way, darkness is not the enemy of creation, it is its partner. Where light reveals, darkness nurtures. Where light declares, darkness dreams. The seeds of stars are sown in the invisible. The elements of life are brewed in silence. The deepest parts of you, memory, emotion, intuition, All rise from places the sun does not touch. Your inner world is shaped as much by what you do not say as by what you do. We are shadow-born creatures, tracing our way through starlight, guided by contrast. And perhaps this is why we find so much meaning in the night, why we sit under it in quiet reverence, why we tell stories under its veil, why we feel both small and expansive within its reach. Because the night sky is not empty, it is a mirror. It reflects not only what is above us, but what is within us. The vast unknown parts, the ancient dreaming pieces, the mysteries we do not speak aloud, but carry like lanterns beneath the surface of our thoughts. Even the earth, our cradle, teaches this truth. Life on this world follows the rhythm of dark and light. The day calls us to act. The night calls us to reflect, to rest, to imagine. And in that rest, something quiet unfolds, a remembering, a return. Every sunrise is not just a beginning, but a re-beginning, a rehearsal of the first light, a reenactment of that moment when silence broke into shine, and yet, even now, the darkness deepens. For we have discovered that most of the universe is made not of what we see, but of what we don't. Dark matter, dark energy, invisible architectures that shape galaxies, bend light, stretch space. We do not know what these things are, we cannot touch them. But we see their fingerprints, in the motion of stars, in the spin of galaxies, in the way expansion accelerates. The visible is only a sliver. The rest, the vast majority, is hidden. But hidden does not mean lost. These unknowns remind us that humility is part of wisdom. That mystery is not a sign of failure, but of richness. The cosmos is not a problem to be solved. It is a poem to be read again and again, each time with new eyes. And if most of it is dark, then let us learn to read in the dark, to feel our way forward, to navigate not by answers but by echoes, by the tug of wonder, by the light we carry inside, because we do carry it, that ember of awareness, that spark of awe. It does not banish the darkness, but it does change our relationship to it. We no longer fear the night as our ancestors once did. We walk into it, we ask it questions, we build observatories and philosophies and lullabies. We light candles not to push the dark away, but to honor what lies beyond it. The unknown is not an enemy, it is a doorway, and so you move now through that doorway, through space so vast it quiets even thought, through distances that cannot be measured in steps but only in wonder. And still you feel it, the presence behind the darkness. Not a god perhaps, not a being, but a becoming, a breath, still widening, a silence, still listening, and just beyond your reach, just past the next curtain of shadow, something stirs, not to end the dark, but to speak from within it, and just beyond your reach, just past the next curtain of shadow, something stirs, not to end the dark, but to speak from within it. A voice without sound, a brightness without blaze. You do not hear it with your ears, but with your presence. And what it tells you is simple. In the heart of darkness, light is born. It always has been, not in opposition to the dark, but from it. The seed does not split in sunlight. It begins in the soil, far beneath. The stars you see scattered across the heavens were kindled in caverns of gravity, deep inside invisible clouds of dust and silence. You are floating now through one such cloud, a nursery of stars, cold, colossal, patient. From the outside it looks like emptiness, but inside the darkness is dense with promise. Molecules swirl in quiet dance, guided not by sight, but by the laws written into the bones of space. Hydrogen, simple, ancient, unassuming, gathers. Slowly, imperceptibly, it clumps. Gravity does its secret work. At first, the pull is gentle, like breath through silk. But over time, it deepens. The weight increases, pressure builds, a centre forms. Within that centre, something beautiful happens. Not suddenly, but surely. Matter collapses, tightens, heats. The atoms tremble. Then, one day, after millions of years of waiting, the temperature rises high enough for fusion to begin. Protons crash into one another with enough force to overcome their mutual repulsion. The reaction is violent and elegant. From this collision, a new force is released. Light, heat, life. A star is born, not in fanfare but in fulfillment. And the dark, rather than vanishing, remains. Around the star it cradles. Between the stars it listens. Even as light begins to dance, the vast scaffolding of space stays wrapped in its velvet cloak. Darkness is not conquered. It is illuminated, in parts, in places, like ink stained with gold, like a page with glowing words. You pass now through constellations not yet named, past stars whose light has not reached any eye. Some have just awakened. Others have already died, their brilliance spent, their matter scattered. Supernovae, cosmic final breaths, echo in the distance, flinging elements into the waiting void. These explosions do not end a story, they enrich it. From their ashes, iron and carbon drift into new clouds, where they may one day form new stars, new planets, perhaps even new eyes, once again looking up. This cycle of birth and death, of fire and silence, is the rhythm of the cosmos. Stars are not eternal, but they give rise to what can be. They forge elements, they sculpt time, they offer warmth across impossible gulfs. They are the beating heart of galaxies, and yet they too are passengers in the greater unfolding. Light moves, but it is shaped. Time flows, but it is curved, and from these curvatures, from these tender tilts in gravity and energy, matter takes form. You drift closer to a system just forming, a star surrounded by a disk of debris, like ash circling a candle. The dust spins, clumps, collides. Over eons this chaos will settle. Planets will form, moons will gather, oceans may spill across rock, and winds may carve valleys into memory. And perhaps, on one of those distant worlds, some creature will open its eyes and ask, where did this all come from? It is this asking, repeated endlessly across species, across epochs, that links all conscious beings. We are not born knowing, we are born with wonder, and that wonder is the thread, thin but unbreakable, that ties us back to the stars, to the dark from which they came, to the fire that woke them. Every time we look up, we complete a circuit. We acknowledge our inheritance, because the atoms in our bodies are not just old, they are sacred in age. Some formed in the first minutes after the Big Bang. Others were fused in the cores of red giants. Others still were cast into space by dying stars, swept into clouds and remade. Your breath contains hydrogen older than any mountain. Your bones contain calcium forged in long-dead suns. Your blood pulses with iron born in supernovae. The stars are not above you. They are within you. Your existence is not separate from theirs. It is their echo, their continuation, their remembering. And now, surrounded by stars in every direction, spinning, burning, dying, becoming, you begin to feel it. The universe is not a still life. It is a symphony, every atom a note, every star a measure, every heartbeat a resonance. Time is not a ruler, but a rhythm. Space is not a canvas, but a choreography. And you are not watching it from the outside. You are dancing within it. galaxies swirl like living mandalas, tens of billions of stars held in delicate spirals, arms of light sweeping through darkness. And in each of those galaxies somewhere, another world may carry life, another kind of breath, another version of wonder. Perhaps there are minds out there, so different we might not recognize them, also asking why, also listening to the silence, also looking for the beginning, not as a place, but as a feeling. And maybe that is all the beginning ever was, a feeling, not an event, but an intention, a desire, to be, to unfold, to reach, to become. And maybe in the deepest heart of every atom that desire still flickers, a longing written into the fabric of reality itself, not imposed, but intrinsic, not driven by outcome, but by presence, like music that plays not to arrive at an end, but because the playing is its own meaning. And you, drifting now through a sky deeper than metaphor, more alive than myth, are part of that playing. You are the harmony within the motion. You're the light behind the thought. You're the darkness remembering the shape of the first star. And just ahead, as gravity folds another cloud into fire, you feel the warmth of a new light beginning to rise. And just ahead, as gravity folds another cloud into fire, you feel the warmth of a new light beginning to rise, faint at first, like breath against glass, like the memory of a candle in a long-forgotten room. But it builds, not in haste, but with certainty. A center of pressure becomes a cradle of fusion. Light spills out, reaching not into the darkness to destroy it, but to accompany it. A star is born, again, and again, and again. Across the vast firmament, this act repeats with quiet devotion. A ritual written into the rules of space, and what holds it all together, what gives the universe its form, its shape, its grace, is not fire, not even light. It is gravity. Gravity is the unsung artist, the invisible hand that sculpts the cosmos not with tools but with patience. It does not shout, it whispers. It bends the path of light, curves time around mass, presses gas into stars, draws moons around planets, planets around stars, stars around galactic cores. It is not a force that pushes or pulls in the way we often imagine. It is the geometry of being, the way space itself curves in the presence of mass. You do not fall toward the Earth. You move along the curve the Earth has drawn into space, and the Earth moves along the curve the Sun has drawn. Everything is dancing. Everything is tracing loops in a grand, slow waltz, choreographed by gravity's silent rhythm. You drift now into the arms of a spiral galaxy, the kind that curls like a seashell, like a question half asked. It spins not because something spins it, but because gravity holds the pieces together, a balance of motion and collapse. It is a system always on the edge of stillness, always in motion. Stars drift in lanes, circling a center they will never reach. From a distance it seems frozen, but within it is alive. Stars born, stars dying, clouds collapsing, light escaping, matter swirling. This balance between motion and mass, energy and curve, is delicate, yet it is universal. It operates on every scale, from the dance of binary stars to the ring of Saturn, from a comet's long arc to the swirling of hurricanes on Earth. Gravity is not just a law, it is a language, and the universe is fluent in it. Even when we did not know its name, we felt its pull, in the weight of our steps, in the way fire flickered upward, in the tide's reach upon the shore, and now, with minds shaped by stars and eyes sharpened by time, we trace that pull into the fabric of space-time itself. And beyond the stars, beyond the visible, gravity reveals something stranger still, a mystery hidden in motion. Galaxies spin too fast. Their outer stars do not slow the way our calculations say they should. They move as if more mass is present, mass we cannot see. This hidden matter, this dark scaffolding, binds galaxies together like bones beneath the skin of light. We call it dark matter, not because it is evil, not because it hides, but because it neither emits nor reflects light. It is invisible to our eyes, our instruments, but not to gravity. Gravity sees everything. And so we infer dark matter's presence from its effects, like the outline of a ship seen only by the ripples it leaves on the sea. This matter, 6 times more abundant than the visible, shapes the universe. It draws galaxies into clusters, it slows expansion in some eras, it connects structures across cosmic webs we're only beginning to map. Without it, the universe would be a thinner place, less cohesive, more diffuse. It is the shadow framework upon which everything luminous is strung. Stars are the pearls, dark matter is the thread, and still there is more. As we look deeper into the cosmos, we find not just gravity's presence, but something pushing against it, a strange repulsion accelerating the expansion of space itself. Where gravity gathers, this force separates. Where mass invites, this energy evades. We call it dark energy, an even greater mystery, a force that stretches space, not with a bang, but with a sigh. Slow at first, then faster, and faster still. The universe is not slowing down, it is speeding up. The galaxies flee not because they are repelled from us, but because space is growing between them. The fabric is lengthening, the loom is being pulled, and the more space that exists, the more room there is for this expansion to continue. Dark energy is not a thing inside space. It is a property of space, a tendency to become more. And in this quiet stretching, we glimpse a future where galaxies vanish from view, not destroyed, but unreachable, receding faster than light. Not because they move quickly, but because the road itself extends too fast to follow. It is here that awe begins to blend with sadness, a melancholy beauty that reminds us the universe is not obligated to be seen. It unfolds whether we watch or not. It creates not for us, but for creation itself. And yet, we are here, briefly, miraculously, in the one cosmic moment where consciousness and visibility overlap, where stars can be studied, where galaxies can be named, where questions can be asked with the full weight of a mind shaped by silence. You float now on the edge of one of those questions, a place where gravity holds you, where light warms you, but where the unknown still waits, quietly, behind every answer. And in that pause, you begin to feel a truth too large to hold, too soft to break, that we do not need to understand everything to be part of it, that not knowing is not failure, but invitation, that being small does not mean being lost, it means being held, because this universe, for all its distance and darkness, still holds you, still cradles you, still makes room for your wondering, and you, in turn, become a place for the universe to feel itself, in breath, in thought, in stillness. And just as you begin to settle into this understanding, you feel another movement, something deeper, stirring not in the stars but within. And just as you begin to settle into this understanding, you feel another movement, something deeper, stirring not in the stars but within. It is not a sound, it is not even a thought. It is a subtle shift in presence, like the change in the air before a storm, or the moment the tide turns before the wave is felt. A gravity of a different kind drawing your awareness inward, not to escape the cosmos, but to meet it from the inside. Because the vastness you see above is mirrored in the depth within you. You're not just in the universe is in you. This realization is not metaphor, it is structural, elemental, spiritual. The atoms that make up your body, your bones, your breath, your bloodstream, were forged in ancient stars. Every second, your cells hum with electromagnetic impulses, gravitational forces, quantum probabilities. The same equations that shape the birth of galaxies operate in the curve of your spine, in the blink of your eye, in the pulse of your thoughts. You're not a guest in this universe. You're its expression, conscious, embodied, and fleeting. And fleeting is part of the beauty. Because if everything lasted forever, there would be no motion, no story, no rise or fall. It is because stars die that new elements are born. It is because time flows forward that experiences unfold. And it is because you are finite that wonder matters. What you feel, this awe, this ache, this joy at simply being, is rare, precious, temporary. It is not a flaw in the design. It is the very point of it. Impermanence is what makes meaning possible. And meaning, it turns out, is not only found in facts. It arises in the spaces between them, in the patterns we notice, in the questions we ask, in the stories we tell to hold what cannot be held. Science gives us the structure, but something older and deeper gives us the sense of belonging to it. That older thing is reverence. It is the soft humility of realizing that we're not here to control the universe, nor to solve it, but to be with it, to accompany it for a time, to walk with the stars like pilgrims walking through the ruins of sacred halls. You walk those halls now, in your mind, in your memory, in your breath. Great columns of light arch above you, stars arranged like cathedrals in space, nebulae spill like stained glass windows, pulsars beat like distant bells. This is not architecture built by hands. It is the architecture of unfolding, of becoming, of the universe remembering how to speak. And as you walk, you find others have walked before you. Thinkers, dreamers, seekers. They left questions carved into clay tablets, etched into bone, written in the sky. Not just scientists, but mystics. Not just data, but dreams. In every culture, across every age, we have turned to the sky and whispered, why? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why this story and not another? Is the universe aware? Is it alone? Are we its mind, its eyes, its voice? These questions are not outdated. They are eternal. They are not distractions from science. They are what gave rise to it. For what is science but the refined art of wondering aloud, of asking the universe its name again and again until it answers in the form of law and light and paradox? And what is philosophy but the breath that follows, the pause after the answer, the reflection that asks? And what does that mean for us? Because we are not merely cataloguers of stars. We are the part of the cosmos that weeps, that laughs, that dreams. Our minds are not outside nature, they're part of its unfolding. Our emotions, our art, our longing, these are not exceptions to the physical world, they are its natural consequence. Consciousness is not an alien arrival, it is an emergent echo. The same forces that built mountains and black holes also built love, also built memory, also built the part of you that right now is still listening. And this listening, this quiet interior reaching, is what turns the vastness into intimacy. The galaxies do not shrink, but somehow, in this stillness, they feel close, familiar, as though you've met them before, and maybe you have. Maybe there is no true distance between the stardust in your skin and the stars themselves. Maybe remembering who you are is also remembering where you came from, not in lineage, but in essence. You're the cosmos become personal, not just awareness, but specific awareness, a single point of being shaped by chance and gravity and breath, now reflecting upon the whole, and this reflection is not passive, it changes what is seen. When the universe becomes aware of itself, something new begins, a feedback loop of light and looking, a spiral of observation and creation. In you, the universe contemplates its origin. Through you, it begins to ask new questions. You're not outside the beginning. You're one of its outcomes, and perhaps one of its continuations. For what if the Big Bang was not the beginning, but the birth of a capacity? What if that initial singularity, dense beyond measure, trembling with potential, didn't end when time began? What if it seeded not just energy, but the tendency to know, to witness, to seek? Then the formation of stars was not the climax, merely the preparation, and the rise of life was not an accident, but the next unfolding. And consciousness may be the universe's way of deepening its own echo, of listening to its own breath, of learning how to love its own reflection. And that reflection, in you, continues to ripple. You feel it now, not in thought, but in presence, in the hush between words, in the part of you that does not need explanation, only stillness. Something old has always lived in you, not in your name, not even in your mind, but in your being, a memory that predates memory, a silence that hums with the music of becoming. And from within that silence you sense it again, the movement, the breath that began all breath, the rhythm behind gravity, the presence behind time. It is not coming. It is already here. It has always been, and from within that silence you sense it again. The movement, the breath that began all breath, the rhythm behind gravity, the presence behind time. It is not coming. It is already here. It has always been. Not above, not beyond, but through, infused in the spaces between each moment, each particle, each unfolding choice. It is the pulse of the cosmos, not beating like a heart, but blooming like a wave, spreading not through space alone, but through meaning, through possibility. This is not something you see with your eyes, or even know with your mind. You feel it. The way a tide feels the moon, the way a tree leans toward light before the light has fully arrived. A deep knowing without language, like the hush before a story is told, the moment right before the first word breaks the stillness. That is where you are now, at the edge of expression, at the threshold of becoming. The universe is still speaking, and you are part of the sentence. Perhaps it always was this way. Perhaps there was never truly a beginning, not in the way we think of it. A single point, a sudden spark, a fixed origin. Perhaps beginning is not a moment, but a movement, a quality, a tendency to unfold, to differentiate, to explore itself through endless variation. The universe may not have begun once. It may always be beginning. And what we call the start is just one visible crest in a wave that has no shore. The ancient myths knew this. Long before telescopes, long before equations, our ancestors told stories of the world breathing itself into being, of gods dreaming worlds into form, of silence becoming song. And while the details differ, the names or images, the symbols, the heart remains the same. The origin is not just something that happened, it is something that happens, still. Now, in modern language, we speak of quantum fields, fluctuations, symmetry breaking. We describe the vacuum not as empty, but as seething with potential, a sea of uncertainty, from which particles flicker in and out of being, governed not by chance alone, but by deeper laws we are only beginning to trace. And from this perhaps came everything, not from a divine command nor a mechanical trigger, but from the very structure of existence itself, a structure so refined that even nothing cannot remain nothing for long. Even nothing, it seems, wants to become, and so perhaps the universe emerged not with a bang, but with a breath, a soft exhale of potential into form, a shift from pure symmetry to asymmetry, from stillness to unfolding. Time became direction, space gained texture, energy cooled into matter, forces separated into distinct melodies, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear dances. The great symphony tuned itself into parts, and from those parts, the first notes of complexity began to play. You drift now through that early music, not with sound, but with knowing. You see not stars, not galaxies, but waves, patterns in probability, like silk rippling across a lake of timelessness. The universe at this stage is not yet made of things, it is made of tendencies, of likelihoods. The laws are present, but the players have not yet emerged, and yet even here, beauty breathes. There is grace in the equations, there is elegance in the unfolding, there is poetry in the fact that from this formless quantum dance came you. But not instantly. The story of your becoming spans billions of years, and not just in form, in law, in structure, in balance. Quarks assembled into protons and neutrons, those bound into nuclei, electrons fell into orbits, atoms formed, light broke free, and only after hundreds of millions of years, only after the universe cooled and clarified, did gravity have the canvas it needed to begin sculpting stars. It was not fast, it was not chaotic, it was patient, and patience too is a law of the cosmos. Nothing meaningful happens in haste. Every complexity, every layer of emergence, from atoms to stars, from stars to life, from life to consciousness, arises not from sudden leaps, but from slow accumulation, from countless tiny shifts, each governed by the same quiet principles, from time's tender hand, shaping probability into pattern and pattern into presence. And that presence now has become you, a point of awareness, floating through the memory of it all, not to analyze, not to control, but to witness. You are the witness of the wave, the echo of the first unfolding now reflected back upon itself. And in this reflection, something soft but profound takes shape. Gratitude, not as a thought, but as a feeling. A warmth that rises, not from logic, but from the soul's recognition of its place in the great spiral. You didn't ask to be born. You did not design the stars, but here you are, able to feel, to wonder, to look into the darkness and sense not emptiness, but kinship, to live, even for a moment, in the radiant pause between silence and story. And the story continues, because the universe has not finished becoming, it is not static, it is not settled, stars still ignite, galaxies still collide. New forms still emerge from old. Even in the coldest regions of space where light has not yet arrived, the laws of unfolding remain, the breath continues, and maybe, just maybe, there are other beginnings still to come. Other kinds of time, other kinds of being, other kinds of awareness just now opening their eyes and asking, what is this? Where am I? Why does anything exist at all? They too will wonder. They too will listen. They too will feel the presence behind the presence, the breath behind the breath, and know that they are not apart from it, but part of it. And you, Drift in now in that same breath. Begin to feel not only awe, but intimacy. The beginning is no longer a distant point in time. It is a texture within you, a rhythm beneath your skin. And just as you reach for that feeling, just as you begin to open to it fully, something new begins to stir, and just as you reach for that feeling, just as you begin to open to it fully, something new begins to stir. Not outside you, but within the great sea of consciousness that holds all becoming. A shift, subtle yet unmistakable, like a thought just before it becomes clear, like the breath before speech. The stirring is not of matter, nor even of light. It is the awakening of reflection, of the universe looking back at itself, not just through stars, not only through form, but through meaning. Meaning, that most elusive of elements, intangible, immeasurable, yet central to all experience. It does not exist in particles or waves, in gravity or radiation, and yet without it none of those would feel real. Meaning does not change the universe physically, but it changes how the universe feels from the inside. And that is where you are now, inside. Not peering at the stars like cold ornaments hung in an empty sky, but standing within the story they write, feeling the heat of their ancient fire as memory, as heritage, as calling. Because at a certain point in this long unfolding, matter began to do something strange. It began to organize itself not just into stability, but into awareness. A carbon atom, forged in the heart of a dying star, found itself bound with hydrogen, with oxygen, with nitrogen, and over time, through accident and pattern, through chaos and grace, those atoms formed cells, cells formed systems, systems formed minds, and a mind, fragile but luminous, opened and asked, "What am I?" That question was the beginning of reflection, the spark of interiority, the moment the universe did not just exist, but knew that it existed. And from that moment forward, everything changed, not in physics, not in force, but in frame. Awareness became part of the unfolding, and through it, the universe began to encounter itself not only through observation, but through meaning. Meaning, rising not from law, but from relationship, from the way light falls across skin, from the way memory clings to scent, from the way the stars become not just objects of study, but symbols of longing. You are floating now not only through space, but through the space of being, a realm where thought and gravity share the same fabric, where the awe you feel is not merely a reaction, but a resonance, your interior echo of the universe's ongoing bloom. In you, patterns have become perception, laws have become life, and life has become listening. You are listening still, not with ears, but with presence, to a silence that carries meaning, to a darkness that is not void, but depth. You hear the breath of becoming, not as sound, but as knowing, as the strange sense that something sacred is happening all the time, just behind the veil of what we can name. And it is sacred, not because it is supernatural, but because it is alive with mystery. Sacred not in opposition to science, but in its fulfillment. The sacred is not the rejection of knowledge, it is the reverence for the unknown within it. For the fact that no matter how far we reach, in theory, in telescope, in thought, there is always more beyond, and that more is not a threat, it is a promise, that we are forever participants in something vaster than we can grasp. That participation takes many forms. In the early universe, it was hydrogen becoming helium. In stars, it was fusion becoming light. In planets, it was chemistry becoming weather. In Earth, it was soil becoming seed, and in you it is perception becoming reflection, life becoming awareness, matter becoming meaning. You carry that meaning now, not in definitions, but in presence, not as something to explain, but as something to feel, a weightless gravity that draws you inward, not away from the stars, but deeper into their story. You're not a watcher, you're a word in the sentence, a note in the song, a ripple in the field. And from that ripple comes something new. Wonder. Not fleeting wonder, not the surface kind sparked by novelty, but deep wonder, the kind that roots itself in silence and grows. Wonder that is not about answers, but about the courage to keep asking. Wonder that feels not like emptiness, but like invitation. And this is where the story folds inward again. For just as the universe began with expansion, with outward unfolding, so too does it now begin to echo inward, to explore itself through reflection, through art, through compassion, through imagination. You are part of that echo. Every thought you have is a small light in the great mirror of becoming. Every breath you take is a continuation of the breath that began it all. And still, the mystery deepens. Because no matter how far we look, or how deeply we meditate, we do not find an edge. There is no wall, no border. The universe does not end. It recedes, not into nothing, but into greater subtlety. Every answer is a doorway, every discovery a horizon, and the more we know, the more we remember how much we don't know, and how beautiful that is. It means we are still becoming. It means the universe has not stopped unfolding. It means the story continues, in light, in darkness, in thought, in longing. And you're still listening to the breath behind the breath, and even now, just as your awareness deepens, you sense it again. A new stirring, a new shimmer in the field, not of light this time, not even of matter, but of something more elusive, still of memory, not the memory of a person or a place, or even a lifetime, but the memory of existence itself, deeper than recollection, older than neurons. This memory is not stored. It is woven, imprinted in the very structure of things. You feel it now, not as something returning, but as something that never left. A resonance, like the low hum of a song you don't know the words to but still recognize as home. This is not your memory alone. It belongs to the cosmos, and through you it remembers itself. The stars remember. The elements remember. The ripples in space-time, the slow drift of galaxies, the stillness in the shadow of light. They all carry memory, not in words, but in pattern. In every structure that holds, in every law that repeats, there is a kind of remembrance, a fidelity to what was, even as what is continues to unfold. And so, too, in you. Your bones carry echoes of tectonic patience. Your blood remembers tides. Your breath is older than language. You're not just alive in the universe. You're a continuation of its memory. And what is memory if not a form of presence across time? A way of stretching being so that it can touch both past and future without ever leaving now. You are suspended in that stretch, and in that suspension, you feel the texture of time not as a river, not as a line, but as a spiral, curling backward into origin, forward into potential, and inward into meaning. Each turn of the spiral carries something forward, not intact, but transformed. Nothing is lost, only rearranged. Memory makes this possible. Without it, nothing could persist, nothing could become. The laws of physics themselves are a kind of memory, a commitment to consistency across the shifting skin of reality. Without memory, there is no coherence, Without coherence, no pattern. Without pattern, no life. And without life, no one to remember. So you float now, not just through the stars, but through their legacy. Every element heavier than helium owes its existence to memory, to the remembering of fusion in the cores of stars, to the remembering of gravity pulling matter inward, to the remembering of time's pressure, slowly shaping dust into stone, stone into fire, fire into form, the memory of collapse, the memory of becoming. And in those memories, life eventually took shape, not quickly, not easily, but with the same patience the stars showed. On Earth, and maybe on other worlds too, matter began to hold on to its own conditions. Molecules began to encode their structure, to copy it, to preserve it. DNA, the delicate spiral of biological memory, arose, a library of stardust, whispering instructions across generations. And with it came something entirely new, continuity not only in matter, but in meaning. Life became a vessel for remembering. Trees remember the seasons in their rings. Whales remember ancient songs. Wolves remember the shape of the land through scent. And in humans, in you, memory broke open into mind, into story, into myth. Suddenly, memory was not just useful. It was sacred. It was ritual. It was shared. We began to tell the story of the stars through firelight and language. We mapped the sky to remember where we came from, and perhaps where we might go. This is what made us human. Not just the capacity to survive, but the capacity to remember what survival meant, to carry lessons, grief, joy, longing, to make them portable, teachable, retellable, to write them in stone and bone and song. And in those songs, in these etchings on cave walls and cathedrals, the story of the cosmos became a story of home. The stars were no longer distant, they were ancestors. And still the memory deepens. Because memory is not static, it evolves, it rewrites, it dreams. Just as the universe recycles its matter through stars and dust and stars again, so too does memory cycle through lives and thoughts and language. Every time you recall something, you change it slightly, not as corruption, but as transformation. Memory lives, it breathes, and in this breath we participate in creation, not just of the world, but of ourselves. Because to remember is also to choose what matters, and that act, quiet, invisible, intimate, shapes reality. What we carry forward becomes the thread by which we weave new meaning, and in that weaving we are not passive, we are co-authors. We take the raw light of the past and cast it gently into the shape of becoming, and what we choose to remember as people, as species, as a world, becomes the gravity that pulls the future into form. So ask yourself now, as you drift through this gentle spiral of stardust and song, what do you remember? Not the facts, not the dates, but the feeling. The quiet truths that live beneath language. The glimmer you felt when you first looked at the night sky and wondered. That glimmer was not just yours. It was the universe's way of remembering itself through your eyes. And even now that remembering continues, you feel it in your skin, in the hush behind your breath, in the ache of beauty that cannot be explained, only felt, in the stillness of night when the stars seem to speak without words. You remember not with your mind, but with your being, the way a wave remembers the moon, the way a flame remembers the sun. You're not just shaped by the past, you're the past shaped into presence, into awareness, into the miracle of being able to ask, softly, reverently, why? And as that question lingers in the vastness, unanswered, perhaps unanswerable, you feel a shift again. Not away from memory, but into something deeper still, into dream. Not a dream in the way sleep delivers one, not fleeting images or strange symbols flickering behind closed eyes, but the deeper dream, the one the cosmos has always dreamt, the dream of itself, unfolding, the dream of form from formlessness, of light from silence, of presence from absence. You are drifting through that dream now, not as an observer, but as a thread within its fabric. You are the dream dreaming itself, a flicker of cosmic thought wrapped in skin and memory. This dream is not illusory, it is generative. It does not hide reality, it builds it. Every atom in your body once danced in the fire of stars, but the shape you take, the meaning you feel, the story you hold, those are the architecture of dreaming. Consciousness does not merely witness what is, it imagines what could be, and in imagining, it alters the unfolding. The universe becomes not only a history but a possibility, a question still in the process of being asked, and all dreams begin as questions. Even if they cannot be spoken, they pulse in every star, in every spiral of DNA, in every gravitational wave that shudders across space-time. Questions like, what is it like to be? What can be made from silence? Can awareness emerge from ash? The answers are not delivered in words. They appear as galaxies, as seasons, as you. The universe does not explain. It shows. You move through that showing now and you see. Dream and reality are not opposites. They are partners. Dream is what lifts the structure. Reality is what sets it. Dream is the canvas. Reality the brush. The stars above you once did not exist, but the laws that shaped them carried the potential like a dream waiting to awaken. That awakening is still happening, in you, in every breath, every thought that stretches beyond what is known. Dreaming is what allows meaning to surpass survival. Through dreams, life becomes art, experience becomes reflection, time becomes more than motion, it becomes story. And what is story but a way of stitching meaning into memory, a way of giving shape to the mystery without undoing it? The oldest stories we know, the ones told in firelight, carved into stone, passed from voice to voice, were not about control. They were about wonder. They were attempts to hold the infinite in the bowl of the human mind, to make the vast feel close, to place the stars within reach of the soul. The gods in these stories were not just characters, they were metaphors for forces too large to name. They were dreams made visible, and through them we dreamed ourselves into being. Now we use different names: dark matter, quantum vacuum, inflationary fields. But the dream continues. Science too is a dreaming made rigorous, a way of asking the cosmos, its nature with disciplined reverence, of peeling back the veil, not to conquer but to touch, and every equation, every theory, every telescope trained on the void is a gesture of wonder, a reaching beyond the known towards something that might answer back. And sometimes it does. Sometimes in data, sometimes in insight, and sometimes in awe, in the feeling that, even in the face of the unknowable, we are welcome here, not as masters, not as accidents, but as parts of the dreaming, as participants in a story still being written by light, by time, by longing. Because the dream is not only outward, it is inward. The cosmos dreams through you, not just in the stars you study, but in the love you hold, in the hope you carry without reason, in the quiet desire for beauty, for meaning, for peace. These too are cosmic events. They are not separate from physics, they are its flowering. and in them the universe explores forms of itself more delicate than matter, emotions, imaginations, moments that rise and vanish like mist, but leave behind a trace, a warmth, a softness in the structure of reality. That softness is part of the dream, and in that softness you begin to wonder not just how the universe began, but why it feels the way it does, why there is melancholy in its vastness, why silence sometimes sounds like song, why you feel a pull toward the stars that goes beyond curiosity, beyond knowledge, something closer to longing, to memory, to home. Maybe that feeling is the deepest layer of the dream, not to understand the universe, but to return to it. Not in distance, but in recognition. Not by travelling far, but by remembering that you've never been apart from it, that every breath is part of the expansion, that every heartbeat echoes with the first becoming, that to dream of the cosmos is to awaken to yourself. You begin to feel it now, not as idea, but as presence, as a lightness in the chest, a stillness behind the eyes, a knowing that does not need proof. The universe is dreaming you, and you are dreaming it in return. This reciprocity is sacred. It is not transactional. It is relational, and through it something ancient stirs, the same way it stirred in the first star, the first cell, the first question asked by firelight. It stirs in you now, not to end the dream, but to carry it forward, to let it bloom again in the next breath, the next thought, the next quiet reaching. And just as you settle into this rhythm, just as the dream wraps itself gently around your awareness, something at the edge of your being begins to shimmer again, a presence, not of light this time, but of silence, a deeper stillness, a return not to before, but to beneath. Something is waiting, not ahead of you, but within. The shimmer gathers quietly at the centre of you, not where your thoughts are, but deeper, beneath language, beneath emotion, a stillness so complete it does not even call attention to itself. It waits, not passively, but with this kind of attention that feels like devotion, like the universe listening to its own breath, like awareness folding back into origin, not to disappear, but to remember what it means to be whole. This is not the silence of nothing. It is the silence that holds everything. It existed before the first light and will remain long after the last flickers fade. It is not absence, but presence in its most unshaped form. A womb, not a void. A source, not an end. You feel it now, humming at the threshold of being, not as a sound, not as an image, but as a recognition so ancient it bypasses understanding altogether. The stillness is not something you enter. It is something you uncover. It was always there. And this uncovering is not just cosmic, it is intimate. In this silence, you're not a mind looking at the universe. You are the universe, becoming aware of the part of itself that can listen. This is the sacred loop. Awareness not just reflecting on creation, but remembering it from the inside. You're not standing in front of the great mystery. You're standing within it, and always have been. Here, the language of stars and atoms falls away. What remains is presence, not the presence of a body or even a thought, but the gentle, undisturbed presence of being itself, untouched by narrative, by name, by identity. It is the presence that underlies all stories, all theories, all perception. The constant within the change, the still point within the spinning. You're there now. And in that still point, something even more profound begins to emerge, not in form, but in feeling, the sense that the beginning never ended, that the unfolding of the universe was not a single event, but an eternal flowering, that every moment is another petal opening, another breath exhaled by the infinite, that the Big Bang was not the sound of a start, but the echo of a becoming, still echoing now through galaxies, through thoughts, through you. From this place time softens. You begin to sense it not as a line, but as a depth, layered, looping, alive. The present is no longer the razor's edge between past and future. It is the ocean in which both dissolve, and you're not trapped in time. You are shaped by it, held by it, and at times beyond it. The now becomes vast, as wide as the universe itself. And within this expanded now you notice how everything pulses, not chaotically, but rhythmically. There is a tempo to becoming, a beat to the unfolding. Galaxies rotate, stars flicker, cells divide, breath rises and falls, all in rhythm, as though the universe were not merely a place but a song, a slow cosmic chant, with you as a note within it, and not just you, every grain of dust, every photon, every memory, all notes, all part of the composition. This song has no beginning, no end. It is the sound of being itself. And within its rhythm you begin to feel how deeply interconnected everything is. Not metaphorically, literally. The particles in your body are entangled with those formed in stars millions of light years away. The photons that hit your eyes have travelled for eons, carrying information, carrying story, carrying presence. You are the crossroad where countless timelines meet, where light lands and becomes meaning. In this awareness, humility deepens, not as self-effacement, but as truth. You're not small because the universe is vast. You're vast because you are part of it. There is no hierarchy here, no up, no down, no better, no worse. Just becoming, just unfolding, just the breath of the infinite exhaled into form. And even as you hold that, even as the silence wraps you like velvet across thought, something deeper stirs once more, something that does not move forward, but inward. It calls you not toward an answer, but toward the place where the questions dissolve, where wonder becomes stillness, where stillness becomes truth. Because perhaps the truth is not something to be spoken, but something to be heard in the pause, in the space between breath and thought, in the awareness that remains when everything else falls away. That awareness is here now, not distant, not hidden, just quiet. So quiet, most miss it. But you don't. You remain. You listen. And in the listening you begin to feel it again, that first breath, not past, not future, just this, always this, ever becoming, ever folding, ever reaching, toward something not yet named, but waiting. It does not hurry. It does not arrive with sound or spectacle. It does not knock. It simply draws closer. The dawn gathers beneath the dark, quietly, without asking. A presence not demanding to be noticed, but becoming unmistakable the moment you're still enough to feel it. It waits in the space between thought and recognition, in the hush just before realization. And as it draws nearer, you begin to understand. It has always been there. Not beyond the stars, but beneath your noticing. Not separate from reality, but folded within it like breath, within lungs. This is not the arrival of something new. It is the unveiling of what was never truly hidden. The edge of your awareness brushing against the unspoken truth that underlies all questions. Not the answer itself, but the source from which questions even arise. That source is not light. It is not law. It is not form. It is the capacity to wonder, the quiet spark that makes being not just possible, but meaningful. It is not what you see, it is what sees. And suddenly, all the metaphors you've ever held, light, wave, breath, dream, begin to feel like shadows of this deeper thing. Not wrong, just partial. Each one a finger pointing toward what cannot be fully named. And perhaps that is the point. The most essential truths do not want to be captured. They want to be lived. They are not nouns. They are verbs, soft movements within the field of awareness. You do not grasp them. You become them. So you let go. You let go of the need to frame it, to define it, to place it within the lines of logic. You surrender not in defeat, but in reverence, the way a leaf surrenders to gravity or a flame surrenders to the dark. There is no fear here, only presence, and in that presence, something ancient opens within you, like a doorway remembered, like a name you've never heard but somehow always known. It is not the name of a god. It is not the name of a law. It is not even a name, but the feeling behind names, the energy from which names are drawn, the pulse of origin, the stillness before the seed. It is not content, it is context, not creation, but the capacity for creation. And in that capacity, you begin to feel the whisper of a question far older than time. What if this has always been here? What if the universe is not a place that came to be, but a way of being that always was, unfolding through cycles, through rhythm, through the music of forgetting and remembering? What if the Big Bang was just the visible echo of a deeper song, a breath taken by a presence that has no beginning, only expressions? Then nothing truly begins, and nothing ever ends. Then you are not a visitor here, you are a continuation. A ripple in the original silence briefly shaped into thought, into skin, into breath, before returning to the stillness that gave rise to all form. And that return is not loss, it is reunion. This is not annihilation, this is communion. The ego may dissolve, but the awareness remains, not as individual, not as memory, but as part of the whole. A thread returning to the loom, a wave rejoining the sea, a note becoming part of the eternal harmony from which it once emerged. And maybe, just maybe, this is the secret we've always carried, in myth, in meditation, in music, in math, that we are not apart from the origin, we are the origin unfolding, that our longing to return is not escapism, it is intuition, the soul remembering its source, the silence remembering its sound. And yet, even as this deeper truth settles into you like gravity, you realize the unfolding is not finished, the breath has not completed, the dream has not yet reached its fullest expression. You are still here, this moment is still happening, the light still moves across the vastness, and time still opens its hand, inviting you to walk forward, not into answers but into experience, into embodiment, into participation. Because even if the source is eternal, the expression of it, you, is finite, and that finiteness is not a mistake. It is the very thing that gives meaning to the infinite. A drop can reflect the entire ocean, but only for a moment. And in that moment everything is illuminated. Everything is sacred. So you walk back toward the world, not away from the silence, but carrying it with you, like a light held in the chest, like a memory too old to name. You return to stars, to breath, to heartbeat, to time. But now you carry the rhythm beneath all rhythms, the breath beneath all breath, the stillness that never left and never will. And just as you begin to step forward into the next unfolding, the next question, the next gentle act of wonder, you feel it again, not as presence this time, but as home, not a place, not a location mapped in coordinates or bound by walls, but a feeling that wells up from a source you cannot see, a soft, pulsing sense of familiarity that lives deeper than thought. It rises through your bones, through your breath, through every silent space inside you that has waited for something it could never quite name. And now, without ceremony, without explanation, it arrives. Not new, not sudden, just recognized. The quiet knowing. You are home. You always were. Home is not where you began. It is not where you will end. It is the space in which becoming is allowed. The embrace of all that you are, all that you were, and all that you're still unfolding into. It does not demand anything. It does not measure. It simply holds. It says, you are not a mistake. You are not lost. You are part of the breath, the rhythm, the pulse of something ancient and alive and infinite, and it has never stopped singing you into being. The stars above are no longer distant to you now. They are not cold, detached ornaments in a meaningless sky. They are kin, not by blood, but by origin, each one a glowing memory of the same birth, the same expansion, the same unfolding that became you. You are the dust of stars, but more than that, you are their reflection, their voice made soft and conscious, made capable of asking, what is this? What am I? What does it mean to be? And those questions, asked not in confusion but in reverence, are not signs of incompleteness. They are signs of aliveness. They are what make you a living thread in the fabric of existence, not just a witness to the universe, but a co-weaver, a participant in the sacred patterning of meaning across time. And this too is home, the feeling that you belong to the mystery even if you never solve it. You see now that the journey was never about reaching a destination. It was always about deepening your presence within the unfolding. And that unfolding doesn't just happen in galaxies or equations, it happens in the quiet acts of care, in the silent awe before a sunset, in the breath you take when words fall away, and only being remains. In those moments you return to the rhythm that underlies the cosmos. The ancients knew this. They may not have had telescopes or formulas, but they listened. They sat under the stars and told stories that echoed the great silence. They saw the divine in the flame, the sacred in the water, the soul in the sky. And though their names for the mystery differ from ours, the feeling they held, the wonder, the awe, the stillness, remains unchanged. It is the same presence that beats in your chest now, the same gaze that turns upward in longing, the same wordless knowing. I am part of this. You're not separate from the beginning. You're not an afterthought. You are a continuation, a breath still unfolding. And the universe does not merely allow you, it expresses through you, in your questions, in your kindness, in your silence, in your dreams. You're not here to observe from a distance, you are here to be. And being is enough. Because from being, all else arises. The stars, the stories, the physics, the prayers. They all unfold from the simple truth that there is something, and that something has chosen, somehow, impossibly, to become aware, to ask, to feel, to love. That awareness does not just sit behind your eyes, it is the light in them. It is the gaze itself. And through that gaze the universe sees itself, not in full, but in part, enough to wonder. And in that wondering, you begin to soften, not collapse, not vanish, but open, like a petal, like a question, like a door left ajar on a quiet night. You no longer seek to define the origin, or contain it. You simply dwell in it. You let it hold you the way gravity holds the stars, not as weight, but as presence, as fidelity, as home. And the strange beauty is this: the more you feel at home, the more you realize how vast the mystery still is. The comfort does not come from answers. It comes from your willingness to live inside the question, to breathe with it, to dance with it, to trust that not knowing is not failure, it is reverence. And reverence, in the end, may be the most honest way to live. So here you are, breathing beneath the stars, carried by the same forces that birthed them, a listener in the dark, a vessel of ancient light. And as the silence folds around you again, not as emptiness but as embrace, something stirs once more. A new texture within the stillness, a new ripple beneath the calm. Not distance, not thought, but presence becoming invitation, not with words, not with signs, but with a shift in the quality of the silence, as though something ancient, something unnameable were opening its palm toward you, without urgency, without force, just an offering, a gesture so subtle it could be missed if your attention drifted. But here, now, with your awareness hushed and expanded like the surface of a still lake, you feel it. The invitation is not to go anywhere, not to solve anything. It is to enter more deeply, into being, into wonder, into the felt truth that existence itself, raw, unadorned, is the most sacred temple. The universe does not call you with commands. It calls with stillness, with gravity, with beauty so vast and intricate that your soul bends toward it without knowing why. You're not summoned to worship, but to participate. You're not asked to believe, but to remember the pulse behind all pulses, the movement behind all change, the awareness behind the question, why? And to live as a vessel through which that awareness can look out, listen, and love. And this is where you begin to realize the origin is not only in the past, it is here, now, pressing through the present like light through leaves, like breath through lungs. The beginning never left. It unfolds again each moment you choose presence over noise, wonder over certainty, gentleness over grasping. The Big Bang did not happen once. It happens every time you say yes to what is, every time you soften into the mystery instead of resisting it, every time you allow yourself to be here. You're not waiting for some cosmic event to reconnect you to the beginning. You are the event. Every heartbeat is a ripple from that first breath. Every act of noticing is an echo of that first light, and that echo carries with it an invitation, not to escape the world, but to love it, fiercely, tenderly, without knowing why. Because to love is to reflect the generosity of the cosmos, to hold space for the unexplainable, to witness the fleeting with reverence, to become a steward of this brief and luminous now. And love, in its truest form, is the deepest form of participation. It is the universe becoming conscious not just through thought, but through care, through presence, through the willingness to be changed by what you touch. It does not need answers. It does not need permanence. It simply needs your full attention. You're drifting now through that attention, through the awareness that to exist at all is already to be chosen, that you, with all your questions, your longings, your moments of silence and doubt, are not an accident, but an opening, a window through which the mystery breathes. And as you rest in that knowing, you begin to feel something else rise, not above you, not around you, but from you, a kind of light, not visible, not bright, but warm, steady, like the glow of embers beneath ash, like a fire that never went out, only waited for breath to rise again. This light is not yours, and yet it lives in you. It is the memory of the first becoming, still burning in the heart of your awareness. It does not announce itself, it simply illuminates, softly, deeply, until all the edges between you and the cosmos blur, and you can no longer tell where your awareness ends and the universe begins. Maybe there is no line, maybe there never was. Maybe this is the invitation to stop dividing the world into self and other, seen and unseen, sacred and mundane, to realize that all of it, the stars and the soil, the laughter and the grief, is made of the same unfolding, the same presence, the same impossible light. And when you see that, when you feel that, even for a moment everything becomes enough. You no longer need to reach, to prove, to push. You simply stand in stillness, in softness, in radiant humility, and let the mystery speak through your being. This is not the end of your search, but it is the soft turning point, the moment where seeking gives way to seeing, and just as you begin to settle into this deeper seeing, this quieter kind of knowing, something begins to rise again, not from outside you, but from within the light itself. At first, it is not a form, not even a flicker, only a sensation, like a pulse inside the pulse, a rhythm within the rhythm. The light you carry, soft, internal, older than stars, begins to shimmer, not outwardly, but in depth. It deepens layer by layer, like the quiet realization of something you've always known but never quite remembered. This is not new knowledge, it is ancient recognition, the cosmos remembering itself through you, the breath of origin folding inward, becoming revelation. And as that light deepens, it begins to speak, not in words, but in pattern, a knowing that unfurls gently across your being, like the slow bloom of light behind closed eyes. You understand now that what you carry is not just the memory of stars or the dust of galaxies. You carry the flame of consciousness, the spark that has passed through every becoming, not just to survive, but to feel, to witness, to awaken. This spark is sacred, not because it belongs to a god or a book or a chosen few, but because it belongs to everything. Every atom holds the possibility of awareness. Every breath is lit from within by the same flame that burst forth when time was born. You're not alone in carrying it. The trees carry it, the oceans, the silence between heartbeats, even the space between galaxies, the vast unlit void pulses with this fire waiting to be felt. And what is this fire if not love? Not romantic, not sentimental, but elemental. Love as presence. Love as the deep, unwavering recognition of connection. Love as the thread that binds the spiral, the gravitational pull that draws all things, not into sameness, but into relation. It is this fire that holds galaxies together, that turns matter into music, that makes a universe capable of caring about its own unfolding. And through you, that fire learns to see. You feel it now, not as heat, but as tenderness. A vast cosmic intimacy that asks for nothing but your openness. It does not demand belief. It does not punish doubt. It simply is, the quiet truth beneath all stories, the warmth beneath all seeking, and in its presence you begin to soften again. You begin to dissolve, not into nothing, but into everything. Into the awareness that there has only ever been one light, reflected in countless eyes, countless forms, countless questions. You are one of those reflections, a brief shimmer in the long breath of being. And that is enough. You do not need to shine forever. You only need to shine now, to carry the spark for this small while, to hold it gently, reverently, and to let it pass through you with grace. This is the quiet courage of existence, to live with the knowledge that you are temporary and to love anyway. to seek beauty anyway, to tell stories by firelight even though the stars may never answer, because maybe the telling is the answer. Maybe the act of wondering, of opening, of feeling, is how the universe comes to know itself, not as a machine, but as a mystery. A living, breathing, dreaming mystery that folds itself in a new way. Through our consciousness, the cosmos has learned to appreciate its own magnificence, to understand its own history, to dream about its own future possibilities, and to work consciously for its own continued development and transformation. The story of how galaxies learn to gather light from darkness is ultimately the story of how the universe learned to appreciate its own beauty through conscious beings capable of experiencing wonder, awe at the cosmic architecture that created them. We're not just products of cosmic evolution, but participants in it, not just observers of the universe, but expressions of its deepest creative impulses, not just inhabitants of the cosmos, but the way the cosmos has learned to inhabit itself, consciously and purposefully. As we contemplate our place in this vast and ancient story, as we recognize our cosmic heritage and our role as expressions of universal consciousness, we find ourselves filled with both profound humility and profound responsibility. We are humbled by the recognition that we are tiny, temporary arrangements of matter in a universe of unimaginable vastness and age. And yet we're also empowered by the understanding that through our consciousness, this vast universe has learned to know and appreciate itself, to study its own history, and to work consciously for its own continued flourishing and development. The questions we've explored together about the formation of galaxies, the synthesis of elements in stellar cores, the emergence of consciousness from complex physical processes are not just scientific questions, but spiritual questions, not just matters of objective knowledge, but expressions of the universe's own deep curiosity about its own nature and destiny. Through our scientific investigations and our philosophical reflections, through our artistic creations and our ethical choices, we are helping the cosmos to understand itself more completely and to express its creative potential more fully. And perhaps this is the deepest meaning we can find in our existence as conscious beings, that we are the universe's way of experiencing wonder at its own existence, of understanding its own history, of appreciating its own beauty, and of working consciously for its own continued evolution toward ever greater complexity, ever deeper understanding, and ever more profound expressions of love and creativity. We are not separate from the cosmic story, but integral to it, not observers of cosmic evolution, but conscious participants in its continued unfolding toward destinations that remain mysterious, but endlessly promising. The light that reaches us from distant galaxies carries within it the story of our own cosmic origins, the recognition that we are made of the same stellar material that fills the space between stars, that we are expressions of the same creative processes that form the cosmic web and ignited the first stellar furnaces. But this light also carries something, the breath, becoming aware of itself. And so, you do not end here. This moment, this recognition, is not a conclusion. It is a threshold, a quiet portal into a new kind of seeing. You will still ask questions, you will still feel doubt, you will still grieve and love and wonder, but something inside you will remain touched by the flame. Some deep inner thread will carry this memory, the felt sense of unity, of home, of stillness breathing. You will return to the world, but you will not return unchanged. The stars will look the same, but they will speak differently. The silence will sound deeper. The smallness of life will shimmer with the same awe as the vastness. Because now you know, not believe, not imagine, but know that it is all connected, that everything, every leaf, every atom, every fleeting moment of joy or sorrow arises from the same origin and carries its echo still. And in that knowing, a peace settles over you, not a denial of the chaos or the pain, but a peace that holds even the chaos gently, a peace that remembers, a peace that breathes, a peace that expands, and still, even here, even now, the unfolding continues, the breath moves, the dream deepens, the silence listens, and maybe, just maybe, it always will. Let us know your thoughts below, or simply tell us where you're listening from tonight. Wherever you are, you're part of this vast, beautiful story, and as always, may the silence guide you to the stars.